Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Hacking HR, the Total Rewards and Global Mobility Strategy Summit. You are entering now a few days of awesome conversations, everything around total rewards and global mobility. I will be your host for the first panel in this summit, and also we kick off day one, which is all about rethinking total reward strategy. My name is Minola Jacques. Jessa, as always, is backstage taking amazing care of us and making sure everything is up and running. So let's start with a quick ask for help. Please use the comments generously. Do consider this conversation as much yours as it is our panelists. I will ask Jessa to bring them on stage so they will settle in their Zoom boxes and get comfortable with each other. But in the meantime, please do drop us in the comments at least where you are watching us or listening to us from. First, you will help us travel around the world vicariously. And secondly, you will let us know that everything is up and running. So while we are waiting for Joe's technology to decide to use its powers for the good today, maybe just take a few moments and thank everybody for taking the time and the curiosity and the energy to be here. I did want to say a warm welcome, but we are going through a heat wave here in Switzerland, so I wouldn't want to make it too warm for you too, but a wholehearted welcome to everybody. So we were waiting for Joe and we got Joanna. This is wonderful. I see people are popping up. I see comments coming in. This is absolutely wonderful. I will anticipate a question before it drops in the comments. All our panels are being recorded. So in case you miss bits of it or you want to recommend it to your friends and colleagues, you will find it pretty much on the same link that you are using to view it. So let's hope that Joe will be able to rejoin us in just a few minutes and maybe kickstart the conversation and therefore the summit. And the drill is quite simple. I will pass the e-mic around clockwise as you are on my screen, and I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves. And also, I do have a curiosity. What is one deeply held belief or learning that you had about total rewards that got challenged or you had to go back and reassess most recently? And I will give you a few seconds just to encourage everyone to drop their own answers in the comments. So, Angela, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Hello. I'm Angela Connell. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for H&L Lab Medicine. We are a clinical laboratory, and I've been in the HR field for approximately 25 years.
Wonderful. And what is one thing about total rewards that you recently had to reassess or challenge or put to the test?
I mean, I don't know how you choose one thing. I think that it's everything is constantly being evaluated in today's workforce. So I don't know that there's one thing that I can pick, except that me and my team are on top of it at all times, challenging and re-challenging ourselves, because I don't think that it's ever steady state when it comes to total rewards.
Thank you so very much. Joe, it's good to see you, and thank you for finding a solution to join us.
Had to get creative today. It's great to be here. I'm Joe Pope. I'm the VP of Total Rewards and HR Operations at Link Logistics Real Estate. I've been in the total rewards space for about 20 years progressively, leading different areas of compensation and benefits, as well as HR systems. For me, and this came after, I'd say, the Great Resignation period, I used to think that market data really spoke for itself. And it's only part of the equation now. Market data, by the time you get it, it's already old. And so as rewards leaders, we really have to stay on top of the different market dynamics, the macroeconomic environment, and really lean into creative strategies that use different sources of data. It's just different than it was, I'd say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago.
Thank you. You rearranged, my screen got rearranged. So let's go to Joanna and welcoming Renuka, just repeating the question, short introduction, this you know. And what is a deeply held learning or belief that you had about Total Rewards that got challenged most recently? So Joanna.
Hello, everyone, and very happy to be here. I'm an HR director for PCG Consulting. I've been in all areas of HR, actually, and also spend a lot of time with burnout. So speaking about change and how we adjust to the market, like Joe mentioned, I spend a lot of time in that space. Now, in regards to a deeply held belief, and I've also spent a lot of time in the government sector. So there, everything is pretty much, served for an entire population. And so most recently with the AI customization and being able to customize benefits for different parts of the workforce has been a huge change for us. And so we haven't been able to do that in the past, right? The type of benefits that were available for everyone. Now we're able to customize based on the needs of the workforce. And especially because we're now able to do a lot more slicing and dicing and anticipating the needs of the workforce that might be here or that we are, we are foreseeing in the market. So AI has changed a lot for us, and the abilities that we're able to create for the workforce in the reward space are a lot more diverse than they were in the past.
Thank you. Renuka, it's good to see you. You're making our panel complete now.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I had some technical difficulties getting in, but I'm here now. And hopefully you can hear me well. So lovely to join all of you. My name, as you can see on the screen, is Renuka Iyer. I work as the VP and Chief People and Culture Officer here at Pharma. And Minola, I love that question. What is one belief that I've held about Total Rewards? I think my belief that has been challenged has been about engagement, staff engagement, and the consideration that extrinsic rewards, whether that's monetary compensation, bonuses, benefits, extrinsic rewards keep people engaged. I think that is a belief that has completely got challenged. And I'm now in the realization that organizations have to be thinking about holistic involvement, not just extrinsic rewards. Extrinsic rewards are important. We've got to pay attention to the market. And I think, as Joe said, by the time we pay attention to the market has shifted, and everything that's going on around us. There is so much chaos and really conflict. So in this conflict-ridden world, rewriting how organizations create environments in which people can stay engaged and involved is quite a challenge. And I think that, to me, that is one idea that I have that has completely turned upside down for me.
Thank you. I was watching the comments coming in, and I see many of our steady friends here, but I would like to highlight a comment dropped by Evelyn Serrano. And she said that my learning is just how much benefits has pulled forward in terms of value for all talent in the current marketplace. In some cases, more important or willing to give up some compensation for the added valued benefit offering in the Total Rewards basket. Not just job seekers, but all employees. Thank you so very much, Evelyn, for dropping this comment, which now makes you a co-facilitator for this panel, because I would invite you to spend a few minutes on this comment. And what are some of the opportunities or niches within the talent marketplace, within the job market, that Total Rewards can fill? How can Total Rewards can rise to the occasion if we look at the overall talent marketplace? And you all know that I tend to go diagonally. So Renuka, I would invite you to be the pioneer for this one. And then Angela, Joe, please chime in. Unmuting competition is officially open. So Renuka, please.
Thank you. Another important question, and I think I will take off on where Evelyn has put in her comment. I think the increase in how we now think about mental health is a complete difference, and I think that has kind of risen in terms of our, in terms of thinking about well-being of people. I think in the past we paid attention just to physical well-being. Now we're also paying attention to mental well-being. With the increased climate change, I know I'm speaking with someone on my in my organization about treating extreme heat as we treat extreme cold. So when there's, here where I am in Washington D.C., we offer what's called snow days, right? So which means on that day you can just work remotely simply because the roads are not ready for people to drive in. And so the question is, do we need to offer extreme heat days? So given that given climate change issues, given other issues with the prioritization of mental health, I think is a big deal. A prioritization of overall well-being. There are a lot of organizations that are now adding a well-being allowance or some kind of opportunities to go to the gym and those types of things. And Evelyn is right that sometimes when we have to do the trade-off between, do we offer a big a merit increase to staff, or do we put those monies towards the benefits? The tilt is happening towards the benefits, and we are thinking about the holistic package. And sometimes people stay in organizations because of the package, the benefits side of things, not simply the compensation. So I think that is one shift that I think the total reward space has kind of brought forth in retention of staff.
Thank you.
And another shift that I'm seeing is with the multiple generations in the workplace, right? So there's been a deliberate shift, I'd say, over the past 10 years from just talking about an employee's own needs, but now we discuss, okay, what do they need as far as childcare, time off for new parents. There's sandwich generation employees, right? So they have elder care issues that they have to work with. And it's not just benefits, as far as service providers that can help them navigate these challenges, but it's also a time off component, it's a flexibility component. And so one of the ways that I'm just seeing HR teams stretching is trying to figure out where is that balance between meeting an individual employee's needs and then being fair across the board while also, maintaining business continuity. I don't think any of us have solved for that yet, but I think that as we continue to think about our total reward strategies, using data and really continuing to get employee input along the way is going to really help make sure that we have that we maintain a high ROI on our programs. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to add more and more costs. And a lot of management of programs that might not be utilized by the broad population.
I also think to that point, it's when you're building these packages that have a lot more options, how are you ensuring that there's equality across all the workforce in those different areas? And while you're altering packages and flexible arrangements for everybody, how do you ensure that it's fair across the board? So I agree the benefits and the flexibility all go into the package now. I just think it's challenging, like you said, Joe. We don't have the answers because how do you also have transparency in a model like that? But some other changes that I think we'll be seeing is the shift towards skill-based compensation models, which I think are newer to everybody as well, and shifting from the years of service based model or rewards through the merit process. But I think we'll also be seeing shifts in things like on demand, people getting paid quicker, on a daily basis, having access to pay in the lower paying positions. And then things like employees being able to choose their package, as Joe and Renuka both said, I want flexibility and not being in the office, and I might take that over higher paying compensation.
A lot of the comments echo your insights, or they give additional information. I was listening to you, and I had a question popping up in my mind. It's not fully formed, so I'm speaking while thinking, which is not always a great idea, but hopefully I can get it out. With everything that is changing within the world of total rewards, as you design total reward strategy for the future, who are your key stakeholders as HR professionals? And I do have extra points for stakeholders who are either new to the stakeholder group or are not necessarily the usual suspects when it comes to total reward strategy. And Joe, I would ask you to lead us into this slice of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the company. So if in larger organizations, usually you have a corporate strategy team, and I think the total rewards leader really needs to be have a fundamental understanding on where the business is going, and that can inform the compensation approaches, and especially if the business is going to be expanding into different territories, there are different kinds of benefits, remuneration that are required in different localities. So staying on top of that is going to help that total reward strategy become even more flexible, nimble, adaptable, and less reactive. And I'd say also, really the business leaders are the ones that bring this all to life. When an employee has concerns about their total rewards package, not necessarily come to HR, they might in some circumstances, but usually it's their manager that's hearing about it. And I think that having that transparency, the strong communication, and even a line of sight to HR as far as the sentiment is going to be very key, especially as we are talking more and more about personalization and different kinds of benefits and compensation programs.
I saw nodding on the screen. Angela, what would you add?
So I would just add that, I think treating the total reward strategy as more of a strategic lever than a support function is going to be really important. And stakeholders, I think, in looking at the overall view, are the top leaders in the company, but also the employees, and understanding what your workforce is looking for, so that you're building a package that meets the business needs and also the employee needs. So looking to your employee population and even some of your people who are exiting the company, what are they leaving for? It's not always because they're upset about something, but maybe they can get something else over here. So I think going more to an employee level first instead of our market data is important, and in making sure that we have a total reward strategy to meet our business.
That is a tough act to follow, but I will try and add a few more stakeholders to the list. One I can think of is the board itself, because while the board does not, while the board usually opines only on the CEO's compensation, the board does direct in terms of what are the overall compensation and the benefits. For example, what's the market positioning of the organization? The board does have a say in these types of very strategic decisions, and I think bringing them along, so that could be a stakeholder. Another stakeholder that I can think of is the government, the state government, the central government, like whatever country you are in, the government and the local laws, and if there are changes to those laws, and how does that impact? So partnering with And I could think of organizations that advocate for certain types of laws. So, making sure that considering them as well as a stakeholder. And then the final other stakeholder that I could think of is other, your counterparts in other organizations. So whether you're a part of a network of CHROs from other organizations, or whether you're part of a network of total rewards leaders from other organizations, that particular networking itself could also be a stakeholder. Because sometimes we find that there is a next practice that's happening in one organization. And then all of a sudden everyone is like, hey, what's this new benefit you're offering? Oh, okay, maybe we should start offering that. And then, you send out a survey and you ask your staff, is this something that you would be interested in? And all of a sudden 80% of people say yes. Why didn't you think of this sooner? And then you start offering it, right? You add that into your budget and you start offering it. So making sure that you also consider the network of other HR people that you have in other organizations as part of your stakeholder team to move the needle on keeping up with what's required for staff could also be another idea to think of.
I just had a quick look at the watch, and I cannot believe that we're halfway through our conversation. For some reason, the Hacking HR minutes tend to feel shorter than regular minutes. For the next one, I must make a confession. I am borrowing disruption inspiration from Joe because we've shared conversations before, and I know that he likes to ask questions along the lines of, don't think inside the box, don't think outside the box, think like there is no box. So here's the next question. If you had to build a total reward strategy from scratch now, moving forward, how would you go about it? And even more importantly so, what would you do differently than what most companies are doing today? And Angela, if you could lead us into this, and then Joe and Renuka, please jump in.
So I'm an Instacart shopper on multiple times a week. And I feel like that is in the place that I am in my life that fits me. Even if it's a little bit more, it's the convenience of it. And I think for our employees, many of them would like a more convenient package. So if I could build anything, I would want some type of marketplace where my employees could purchase. Like, I don't need any medical benefits because I'm on my parents or I'm on my, whoever my spouse is. So I would like to spend all of my bucket of money for benefits on golf lessons, a master's course, and whatever else there is that I want to purchase with my funds. So I think that offering a package of this is your cash compensation, this is your bonus, and other plan in there, and then you have a bucket that you can spend as you choose would be the perfect world for me. And maybe having the ability for it to be more like an HSA account where you can, if you don't spend that money now, you can spend it in the future when you're in retirement.
Yeah, that's music to my ears. I think that would definitely support the the need for flexibility and meeting different employee needs and family situations. I also think about I think Angela, was your comment about skills-based skills-based compensation. I think if I were to design from scratch a compensation program, it would support project-based work, pay for skills. It would be flexible. And so someone's compensation could, grow and contract depending on their level of contribution to the organization. How we get there, I don't have answers yet, but I think that could really lean into the whole pay for performance concept and really kind of flip it on its head. And I also think about the different kinds of compensation. You have base compensation as well as variable compensation. I think that we'd have to kind of figure out, what is that baseline compensation that that we would kind of pay across the organization, or even in, at certain levels, and then you kind of tiered the additional pay components on top of it. I think it could be a very interesting compensation scheme to explore.
Yeah, it's not, I don't have anything much to add. I think Joe and Angela have covered it really well. I would also just look at variable pay. I think a lot of us, when we join an organization, we just take what is existing and keep, we just continue with that. We make changes at the fringes. We don't necessarily change everything. We don't necessarily have a blank slate unless we're joining an organization that is like an entrepreneurial, like you're just starting. So because we don't have that opportunity, it's usually and change is hard in organizations. It's usually us just making small incremental changes to benefits and primarily just taking into account what our staff are saying to us, what our leaders are saying, and making those small increments. But yes, if there was one area that I could influence, and that would be the variable pay component. Also, keep in mind there are so many laws that restrict us from just offering a full-on, here's your cash compensation, here's a bucket of money, go do whatever you want, right? There are laws in different countries that restrict us from that kind of do what you need to be done offering. So, making sure that the organization stays relevant to times and stays legally compliant. And those are some additional considerations I think we should be making as we think about the changes we want to put in.
That's so true, especially with pay transparency. The EU obviously has had this longer than the US. But as I think about pay transparency, at least in the US and in the different states, it's not clearly defined yet. That we start with base salaries, and even the range that we have to post in a job opening can depend on your interpretation and the specific circumstances, but doesn't really capture like the different types of pay. It doesn't mention how someone can earn more base compensation, what their variable pay looks like, equity, what that package could look like. And what I'm also seeing too, is I'm hearing from leaders and employees, is they want more transparency around that. Especially, they really don't. Some understand the variable pay and they live and breathe that all day, right? But then there are others that just kind of wait for the end result and hope for the best and just think if they work very hard, the numbers will work out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, because of other factors that are out of their control. So I think being able to really tell that story and be more methodical with the planning, I see that becoming more of a theme as pay transparency continues to progress, in the US and beyond.
Mm. What a great opening for me to just tell everybody that back to back with this panel is a conversation on pay equity, transparency, and compliance. So please do stay on. I also saw some energy around this topic in the comments earlier. So this topic is coming right up, and I am sure our speaker colleagues are very appreciative of this trailer ad for their panel. Now, as we look at capabilities and skills, what are some skills that you would recommend HR professionals who deal with total reward strategy work for them to develop? We mentioned a little bit around data. Angela, you mentioned AI very early on into our conversation. Is there the first among equals, a skill that you would recommend people in our audience to really dedicate time and energy and curiosity to? And it's an open e-mic question. Whoever unmutes themselves first goes.
I unmuted, so looks like I could go. I think all the skills that need to be talked about are talked about. AI, I can't tell you. I think I've been in so many conversations where we're all saying those. I mean, AI will not replace a job, but those who know how to use AI will replace the person. So making sure that you sharpen up your AI skills, I think, is super important. You talked about curiosity. I think that curiosity, oftentimes what happens when you work with, in the area of total rewards, you are trying to create an environment that is fair and equitable for all people. So you anchor, the value that you're anchoring yourself on is on fairness and integrity. And therefore, then you think about transparency as a way to to help people understand things. So all that is great. But somewhere between all of this, I think we get lost and we become more fixated on what is possible and what is not possible. So you did say curiosity. You added the word curiosity in the question, but I think staying and in curiosity and being curious as a means to build trust is important. Appreciating that the total rewards function is simply a function or a tool that allows to build trust between the manager and the employee, and supporting the manager to be able to build trust through using compensation and benefits and other reward systems in place. Staying true to that can be difficult when you are so in the weeds doing your job. So from time to time, just kind of lifting your head up, and that skill of knowing the big picture and knowing why this function exists, and really getting clearer and sharper on what are the different levers we have, what is happening in the market. How we talked about generations. I think Joe talked about it. Paying attention to, is there a generational shift? How many people are going on parental leave? Do we need to shift something in the organization? So really thinking about things like that, and thinking about putting the manager first and the trust between the manager and the employee. I think that in itself is a skill.
Thank you.
I agree. Certainly the AI function helps in this space, but I think regardless, you have to understand the data and be able to tell the story with it. You can't just go off market data that you pull and not dig into the information. So understanding the data and being able to communicate and influence within the company is important as well, because if you don't get that, as was mentioned already, if you don't have the trust and the influence, you're never going to get people on board with the programs that you're implementing. With changes comes the change management process. So I think that if you don't have a team who's addressing that aspect of your total reward strategy and changes that are being made, you need somebody to focus on how you're going to have those champions around the company, so you're not the only one who's backing what you're putting in place. But that also, as was mentioned as well, that leads into your connection in the company. So you're going to want to be talking to people. You're not just going to want to do this in a silo when making the changes. And I'd say that you would also need a little bit of a background in legal and regulatory, as Renuka mentioned earlier. You have to understand those laws. And if you don't have outside legal or inside legal to consult with, you need to make sure you don't spend too much time on a program that's not going to legally work from a compliance perspective.
Yeah, and to tag on to that, it's also, really leaning into understanding how, not only how the business works and operates, but also, how it makes money. And so as we're talking about things like variable comp and even base pay to a certain extent, just having that fundamental understanding can really help business partners influence, to your point, Angela, about, or influence business leaders, but then also educate the total rewards professionals that are behind the scenes about the context. Like, what don't they see that's in their market data? What's that story? What are they really trying to solve for? Really good business partners can translate the business needs to the more technical, and vice versa. So I think being able to understand the data, and then also kind of go back to the business and help them understand that when they have certain expectations or requests as far as compensation or benefits, explain the why. Like, why can't we do something a certain way, or why isn't there, why can't we have a precise view into this certain market dynamic? Maybe it's availability of the data. Maybe it's how, maybe it's the kinds of questions that we're asking. Having that natural curiosity and just asking the right questions is going to be very key to keeping everything together.
Well, we have 5 more minutes left for this conversation, which is a very painful and frustrating thing to say. But I would like to take this time for a question that is very near and dear to my heart. And many people in our audience do live the reality of an HR function of one. So for those of us who are an HR function of one, what is, from everything that we've said, that you would like to highlight or nuance that would apply to their everyday reality? Or is there a specific advice you would like to leave them with? And I will give you a few seconds to think about it, and just thank everyone for being here, welcoming those who joined a little bit later, encouraging you to go back and watch the recordings later on, or stay for as many panels as you can fit in your calendars as we move through the summit. So any advice, any words of encouragement and inspiration for the HR functions of one?
Lean into your network. You're not alone. Chances are there are other folks that you know that are going through the same thing, or if not, they know someone who is. My network has helped me a lot over the years, just with new things that I've never experienced before in my career. And there are experienced people that are willing to help you and point you in the right directions to resources.
Great advice.
I would also say do research when you can, find newer, better ways to do things if you do have a chunk of time. And if you can't find that time, just set aside an hour once a month to, whether it be a new technology that could help you speed up the process with some of the market data or whatever information you need pulled, or if it's finding that network of people, but making sure that you're dedicating the time, because it is so important now that people want a focus on it from the organizations.
Yeah, and I just add on to that, what I would say is listen internally carefully to what people are saying within the organization, to what the leaders are saying, and find out where is it? Skate to where the puck is going, right? So where is it that the organization is going? And now that you have this data from your networks, from the research that you have done, connect the dots, connect what you're hearing externally to what is happening internally. When you do your exit surveys, make sure that you ask the question, what are the top 3 reasons you're leaving this organization? And see if compensation features in that. And if it does, take that data back to your leadership and connect the dots and say, hey, here's what we're experiencing. This is what the research is saying. And this is how, and then make a recommendation. Don't be afraid to make a recommendation. So what if you're a team of 1? Just go for it. Because that's all they have. They have just you.
Well, you did create the opportunity for me to squeeze in one last question, and I do promise this is going to be the last one. If you could think about the best total reward strategy that is, after your own heart and is working, how would you boil down the success of it in one word? In one word, what is the success of a total reward strategy? And we will finish this as we started. I will pass the e-mic around, but counterclockwise this time. So Joe, you go first. One word, which is the success of a total reward strategy.
Flexibility.
Thank you. Renuka.
I don't know if I can say one word, but I'm just going to say forget about it. So if employees have forgotten about rewards, it's working for them, it's not in their thought, then you have a successful rewards program.
Forget about it. If we say it quickly, it can sound like a one word. It's perfect. Angela.
Engagement. If you have people who are sticking around and it's, like Renuka said, a non-issue, I think that it's successful.
Wonderful. Flexibility, engagement, and forget about it. Thank you so very much, Angela, Renuka, Joe, for being here. Jessa, thank you for taking care of us. Everybody in the audience, thank you. Please do stay on. There are no less than 4 other conversations coming up on day 1, and I hope you will enjoy all the insights and all the energy, and you will take a lot of inspiration, but also a lot of encouragement from this summit. Thank you for being here, and take care, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to panel 2 of day 1 of our amazing Total Reward Strategy Summit. And I've got to say, it's just a great summit with amazing conversations that are already deep and dynamic. And I love how Minola have worked together, the panel 1, and the speakers are awesome. I'm Sneha, Chief Event Strategist at Hacking HR, and I am thrilled to be moderating this particular panel on one of most important topics in HR today, which is pay equity, transparency, and compliance. But before we dive into this conversation, I would love to give a quick heads up. Next week on June 30th, we are bringing the Hacking HR Roadshow to the sunny coastal San Diego. So I would love for anyone around and in San Diego to come join us for a margarita or great conversations, and let's have some fun. This is a chance to connect with all our Hacking HR team and with 85 plus HR leaders coming all around from California. So it's going to start at 5:30 p.m. on June 30th at the Margaretville. Jessa will drop a link in the chat so people who are all interested, who are all HR professionals, or if you know someone, please fill in the form. Let's make this magic happen in person too, and our team would be very happy to connect with you all. Now, getting back to today's session, because when we talk about the pay transparency, it's not just about the numbers, it's about building trust, shifting culture, and creating systems that really work for our people. Let's start with one simple question to our attendees. What's one face, the word pay transparency, when you hear about it, what is something that comes to your mind? Please drop it in the chat. No wrong answers. Let's see how this topic is landing for everyone. And a quick reminder for everyone tracking their professional development, this is a credit eligible summit, and so please don't forget to collect your credits. And now let's meet our incredible speakers joining us for this amazing conversation. And I could see amazing ladies on the screen now. As we get started, I would love for you to briefly introduce yourselves and answer one warm up question. So let's start with who you are, what you do, and what's one thing you've learned or unlearned about compensation transparency that surprised you the most. So I see Natalie here on my screen. So can we kick her?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So excited to be in this conversation. My name is Natalie Morgan. I am the head of people for CareerPlug, which is a hiring and retention software company that serves small businesses. And I've been there for over 10 years now and helped the company grow from like 10 to 100 people, and figuring out pay was a big part of it. Another important piece of context for this conversation: we are all remote company, and so we're in 30 plus states, but all in the United States. So we're just a US company. So something in my journey about pay equity and transparency that I've learned that maybe would have surprised me earlier in my career is I've found the more transparent you are about pay, the easier it is to talk about, right? And it just gets easier the more transparent. It becomes like so much less of a taboo. And I think that's really helped our culture at CareerPlug. So excited to dive in more with you all.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Could we have Malvika?
Of course, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Malvika Jetmalani, dialing in from Chicago. I'm the founder of Acvis Group, which is a human capital advisory firm driven by the core belief that to win in the marketplace, businesses must first win in the workplace. I'm also an executive coach and a speaker and writer on all things people. And one thing that I learned in my pay transparency and compensation journey is you can never communicate enough. You must over communicate and always communicate a little bit more than you think you should.
Thank you so much. I see Anjali on my screen next.
Thanks, Neha, and hi, everyone. So I'm Anjali Menon, and I'm dialing in from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Currently, I'm the APAC director for Sibelco. We are a mining company, 150-year-old, so I feel quite archaic in this group at this point of time, but that's fine. We have over 5,000 employees spread across all the regions, Europe, US, and APAC. Along with my regional role of Asia Pacific, I'm also the global business partner for strategic functions. I work with teams all across 42 countries, across 5 continents at this point of time. Most important learning for me, not only from my current job, but previously I was with one of the biggest food and beverages companies globally, Nestle. It's always about adaptability and not perfection. That's what you need to strive for, and specifically with the changes which are happening in terms of compliances and local regulations, and with the generational changes which take place, we have to be very conscious on how do we cater to the needs of different geographies and different generations. So adaptability, not perfection, is my motto to go with pay equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Bukola?
Hi, Sarah, and hi, everyone. Nice to be here again. Interesting topic today. And I think it's just important that we can talk about it boldly. I have led HR across various organizations, many multinational organizations, and I have led across regions as well as globally. My focus for me, has been around ensuring that, the compensation processes are fair. It is data-driven, and we also have context-sensitive practices. I'm usually passionate about making sure that there is equitable pay, as well as ensuring that we also deliver global standards. What would I say I have learned? Many things. But maybe the first thing, or something that comes right to mind quickly, is ensuring that pay equity takes some kind of balance. You would have the global principles, and then you also have the local context. And you also want to ensure that you're somewhat transparent, with the right nuances. It's also important that we are empathetic, as we go through this, and we put ourselves in the shoes of not just the business, but also employees. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've got Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Woods. I'm the COO and head of people for Dockyard. We're a digital product development company, fully remote. I was the first HR person here, so I built all of the structure and things. I would say it feels like I'm cheating, but the takeaway I learned in my compensation practice was the more transparent, the better. So I've come up in other places where salary and wage were like the most closely guarded secrets. And I, had been throughout the majority of my career, that had been the standard. So getting to a point where you got comfortable being transparent when it went against everything that you'd been taught for years, if not many years, we'll say decades, and coming in and being like, let's just open it all up and see what happens, and how freeing and easy that was comparatively than as opposed to being like, well, we've got to keep this quiet and this one quiet and this quiet. So just being like, this is what we're working with. This is how we did it. Made it a lot easier, and I built a lot of trust with our employees in the process as well. So I kind of stole a little bit from a couple of you.
Thank you so much. This is awesome, connecting with all the lovely ladies and with a few of the best professionals in the particular topic today. And I would love to go a little bold with the first topic that I would love to start. So I would kick off with how removing salary negotiation changed the candidate and employee experience. And who would like to kick off?
I can start for that one, because that's kind of how I got started on this like pay transparency journey. Is I was also, Sarah, like building HR from the ground up. It was my first experience in HR. We were a small company, so learning a lot of things on the fly. And maybe back in like 2018, we were around like 40, 50 employees. I was just so frustrated with the whole offer experience in hiring and like putting, yeah, here's what we're going to offer you, and the people coming back and negotiating, which is a good thing to recommend people to do. But I felt like hurt by it in a weird way that you shouldn't feel hurt by, but I gave you my best and now we're going to go back and forth on this. So I really came at it from a, hey, I'm actually going to lead with my best. I'm going to tell people up front in job descriptions, on phone interviews, like no more asking, what do you want to make? I'm just going to say, here's what we're going to pay. We're leading with our best. Is that in line? Let's just get this out of the way up front and then focus on the other important parts of the job. And that made my job so much easier. It made our hiring managers' jobs easier. I'm like, here's what you say. Let's just put this up front. And frankly, candidates loved it, right? I mean, now there's much more, there's, state laws and different compliance things where you need to put salaries up front. We started doing it before we had any compliant reasons to, and I just think it made the whole experience all around so much easier. So we could focus on, can you actually do the job? Do you want to do the job for us? What is our culture? Instead of this overhanging thing, are we going to go through all this investment in hiring and then like hit a roadblock because we didn't talk about pay?
That's amazing. Would someone like to add on to that?
Yeah, I would like to add on from a perspective. I think it's very challenging to do away with the salary negotiation at a global level with organizations because the countries vary and we still see a tendency in different parts of the world for people to prefer this approach. So there is a bit of a counter perspective. What it does is it brings a lot of fairness and transparency into the process, and we focus on skills rather than competitive comparisons. So that's a positive aspect which I see can be implemented in certain countries. But in some countries, it is still the norm, and that's a market practice. And if you as an organization are attempting to do at a global level, it does not work out still. So it's a struggle, but it's fantastic when you reach this stage for fairness and transparency purposes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and say that I was in an organization where we implemented, where we removed salary negotiation for everyone up to the executive level. And when we did that, I feel like the experience became more equitable, especially for women and underrepresented talent. And we've been told for a long time that, women don't feel as comfortable negotiating as men do. And actually, more recent studies have shown that when women do negotiate, it's kind of held against them. And so I think it kind of leveled out the playing field. And previously, outcomes hinged on who negotiated the hardest, not who added the most value. And I think after making that change, candidates came in knowing that we put our best offer forward, like Natalie said, based on their role, level, and experience. And we weren't offering them a compensation package based on their negotiation skills. It was based on the value that they were going to bring. And so I think that shifts the conversation from, can I ask for more, to how can I grow here?
Thank you so much. And I'd love to jump on to the next one. So here is the next one. What role do structured compensation frameworks or leveling guides play in supporting both transparency and equity?
So I can jump in on that. One of the things we did prior to, because much like Natalie, when I came in, people were just kind of hired at certain dollar amounts. There seemed to be no method to the madness. There was, such a wide range. So one of the first things we actually did as part of the kind of, the compensation development is that we obviously had to tie the jobs to kind of comparable jobs in the data that we were getting. So one of the exercises we did is we worked with all of our leaders in helping to basically create an entire competency matrix for every role we had in the company, which also then helped not only provide very objective data that people had on what it is that it means to be, software engineer one or a senior software engineer, or what does it mean and what does that look like? And it provided something that our employees had asked for, which were career paths. And it wasn't just like you're a software engineer, senior software engineer, staff software engineer. What does that mean? What does that look like? And is it comparable? Because, people generally, especially in tech, they don't stay in jobs as long. The average person stays in their job 4.2 years. It's like half that in tech. So if they're moving elsewhere, like how comparable are our roles to other people? So it was really putting that consistency around it for those kind of levels. And it also started the framework for the discussions that we were going to have when we publicized pay bands and where you fell in those. So it was really putting that groundwork in place. So putting that competency matrix together and making sure that we had a very, kind of defined career path for everyone and what their jobs look like, and then being able to tie that to those pay bands so that people knew, okay, this is where I'm at if I'm looking to grow my career, and this is what the next level looks like. And if they're, if there's somebody that is very motivated maybe by the salary or title or whatever it is, they can at least figure out which direction they could go there. So that's kind of how we started with the whole building out the plan. We made it into a broader, it was a discussion that actually occurred in a lot of one-on-ones for like 3 to 6 months before everything was rolled out. That part was rolled out, and people were having those one-on-one discussions with their managers about, let me evaluate myself here, and the manager evaluates them and kind of looks at, do they agree, and or even if the employees saw things that were gaps in the process. So having everybody also involved in it really helped with the leveling and the compensation bands as a whole. So.
Yeah, Sarah, we did something similar in work in progress, getting like a competency framework that everyone really buys into, but to offer kind of how we structured it, because I do think having the framework and like leveling has been really key at my company. And how we do it is every job has 3 levels within it, right? So your senior software engineer 1, you could be a level 1, 2, or 3 of that. It's about a 5% pay differential between that. So giving people, again, back to the career path, growth within their title before they even then can look at the senior software engineer. So it was building in more of that opportunities for growth and learning along the way. And that is what we have published for the whole organization, is you can look at any job title and see levels 1, 2, and 3 and like what that looks like. And then we have those competencies and milestones tied. So getting in with those growth conversations.
I believe it was Malvika that was talking about, the gender equity earlier. And when you think about it, the role of a structured compensation framework, one thing that is critical is having the job evaluations for all jobs is probably the beginning of everything, so that it's clear, that people know what the consistent foundation is. In addition to that is how the roles are valued, how people are paid. And I think it was Natalie that was talking about 3 different levels, in one space. It is not to say employees cannot move or jump, but it helps with progression. It also removes, some level of subjectivity, and takes away some kind of bias. So it's easier for managers and even the employees, it's easier to be able to communicate transparently, where you stand and what is next. So that way there is some level of trust, built within that process in the first instance. I hope that helps.
I think that's such an important point. I was looking at some data from Culture Amp recently at their employee experience trends, and the statement, "I understand how pay and promotion decisions are made," was one of the lowest scoring items in their analysis across companies. And so I feel like one of the ways to change that or to make progress is to have these structured frameworks. I think they're the backbone of equity and transparency. And without them, transparency kind of becomes noise, because you have to remember that when people thinking about compensation, they're typically drawing three comparisons. They want to know, how do I compare to employees at my organization? How do I compare to employees outside of my organization in similar roles? And am I progressing within my organization, or am I stagnant? And when you have these structured frameworks and these kind of leveling guides that set the expectations, scope, and impact by level, compensation decisions start to feel objective. And then people can start to understand, here's where I am, and here's what growth looks like to get to the next level.
I love that. Thank you so much, Malvika. Thank you. And here is my next question to Anjali. We can kick off with her. So, as someone leading HR across diverse APAC markets, how do you adopt global pay equity frameworks while honoring regional cultural and regulatory nuances?
I think I would go back to the conversation and what has been shared by my co-panelists in terms of having a structured framework is very critical, even when you're a global organization. Because why it is critical? Because in a global organization, as you scale up and as you diversify geographically, business value streams, you want the employees to inherently understand that there's a method to your process, and that method applies to people without any biases, and it's not the loudest voice is the one which is heard. So that's the first point, to have a clear global framework in place. In terms of the global framework, what we attempt to do is, our focus is more on having guidelines and focusing on the compliances. So legal comes first. We need to understand, and that's a starting point, along with equity and fairness, legal and compliance regulations across countries, and we have to give it priority. The next part that we focus on is in terms of understanding how the world is changing. One of the very interesting practices I've observed in my current organization is, we decided to go for purchase PPA increments, which is like, purchase power parity. So people do not get an increment only based on benchmarking, but they get an inflation led, because that's the challenge of a global organization, because there are certain countries in Asia where the inflation would be 3 to 4%, but the market increments are much higher. But then you go to Europe, where the inflation will be stable or even 1% or lesser than that, and even the market increment does not happen. So you have to just think, what will you do? And if you have fairness as a principle, yes, we want to support our employees at a very basic level of giving them inflation-led support, so their income should not lower. So this is just an example of saying what kind of principles you need to put in place. So we go with the PPA, and then we look at what are the market differences. So with the global framework, compliance is being taken care of. The third factor comes in, what is the market asking? Because if you are an organization, you have to treat your employees to some extent like your customers. You have to listen to them, and that's what we have been discussing here. The attention you pay to your customers and listening strategy that you have for them, sometimes it's very useful. Actually, most of the times it's very useful to apply it internally. And when you have a good closed loop listening strategy and apply it to compensation, and that's a mistake a lot of organizations do. They focus on engagement activities more. They focus on what can be seen, but compensation is perfect when you don't hear anything. So you have to ensure you take away the noise before it starts. And that's where the listening strategy comes in. So it's with the framework, a robust listening strategy, which tells you what is working and what is not working at a local level is critical. And then you need to keep adapting. So in some countries, you might decide that you have certain banding. Salary bands are very normal. It helps to create transparency. But you will decide that, yes, we will be much more flexible in exception approvals on the bands, because you just cannot get the talent and you have an open conversation with the leadership and the employees as you go along. So that's the third leg of the listening strategies, having continuous communication and transparent feedback mechanism. But it's a very difficult journey because at any point of time, not everybody will agree. And as Malvika has shared about a survey, and I have observed with every engagement survey, rewards question is the one which gets the lowest score. It has never changed in my 20 years of HR career in big organizations. So let's not get enamored by it. You have to go back to fairness and transparency, and you look at a progressive improvement and not looking at the absolute low score, which would be the case. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali. And so I would start with the basic. So I would like to pop a very simple question to everyone. So let's hear back different perspectives from everyone. So what does transparency mean at your company, and how do you make sure it's not just about being visible, but it's also about being clear and fair?
So I would say transparency goes beyond just sharing information. I think it's a bigger bucket that includes building trust. And that's not just with this system. Obviously, this should be something that's ongoing. And part of the culture and values is the transparency that helps build trust. So it's not, it's not just a big 180 from what you've done in the past, and all of a sudden it seems weird that it's not aligning with what you've done before. So your culture should be built on equity and transparency. That doesn't make this seem so strange. But even as a private company, for example, we are actually very, very transparent about our financials. We are under no obligation to be, but our employees know what our financial situation is, and we include them in that information and that knowledge. So it gives them a little bit of a window into how we make our decisions. Being a small privately held company in the tech space, there's always something in maybe a survey that comes out that's like, I heard at one of the FANG companies pays this, and there's not a world that exists where we can pay anything close to what another company pays out there, but letting them know this is our scenario, this is our situation, this is what we're doing, and this is why. I think that's really what goes into the whole part of transparency. It's not just, hey, this is what we're going to do with salary bands, but everything else is hidden, so you have no understanding of the why. When you have somebody, I think, brought along on the why, it helps them understand things in a greater context.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I think Sarah and I, it sounds like we live in similar worlds here, because we do something similar as far as are very transparent as a private company with our employees and our financials all the way through. And back to the original question, I think the difference between visibility and getting to that clarity and fairness is what you're saying, Sarah, is that why. It's the context, it's the story, right? So when we're sharing compensation salary data, we're sharing, here's where we got this job data from, here's the database info, here we're paying this market at this percentile, here's why we're paying it. Yes, I hear you want to be 90th percentile San Francisco rates. Okay, here's what our financials need to look like as a company for us to have this discussion, and redirecting it back towards what are our goals and outcomes, how can we win together as a company so we can reinvest in this compensation and benefits, and just being we have at least quarterly touch points on that strategy and those goals about inviting that feedback in, back to psychological safety that goes and responding to people's questions honestly. I don't when I get market reports back, I'm not sharing very complicated spreadsheets back with every individual. They don't have the context to read them. But for example, we had a couple engineers who were getting the package data from me, and we're I don't believe this. Where is this coming from? I don't, basically questioning the decision. So I was oh, well, if you want more context, I walk them through start to finish. Here is the complicated data. Here is how it compares. Here's how we made decisions. And even if at the end of the day, they're yeah, I still want to be paid more than that, at least they have understanding of we are being transparent, we are can justify decisions about people's pay. And that's from like a values perspective where I want to stand, is that everyone's pay is justifiable if I bring it out into the light and have to say it in front of the whole company.
Snare, if I may come in here, and it's interesting to hear, Sarah and Natalie from GPHR days, you will know how the US works. But if you look at the other, continents, and I think Anjali was talking about APAC, earlier, you will understand, that for different other markets, the nuances are not exactly the same. So yes, it's important to look at, your explaining to employees, your basic salary, your gross salary. This is where you sit from a market data. And in addition to that is even teaching, or training employees how they could get promoted, within organizations. But if you look at emerging markets, there's a bit of, difference, because in approaching fairness and equity, you have to be able to balance, the global consistency and then what is locally relevant. If I would pick specific markets like in South Africa, where they have a kind of structured compliance, environment compared to Nigeria, that has a strong inflation-driven volatility, or even Kenya, where, the talent market is extremely fast moving. There is no one size fits all. So you have to get pretty creative, in how you position, compensation or even compensation information, as well as the transparency, that comes to it. So I think it was Mavali that was talking around, the pay philosophy around 3 pillars, the internal equity, how externally competitive you are, and then now transparency and compliance. But you also have to look at the local realities, on ground. For like in South Africa, you can align, or you will align the detailed benchmarks, with what the legal disclosure is, because they have an Employment Equity Act. In the likes of a Nigeria or Ghana, you have to adjust for inflation on a regular basis. And I think it was what, Anjali was mentioning. And even with that, you have to link, with the US dollar so that you can protect what the real earnings, look like. So that's the pay parity. And then for Kenya, you have to consider regional benchmarks, and then the scarcity, the availability of the talent, and being able to stay competitive for potential digital roles. Now, we've said all of that. If you look at the Francophone, African markets, the priority is around manager education, clear communication, so the gaps, is being bridged where transparency is not common. So again, the intent, if you want to look at the success, is around embedding the local leaders, the local HR leaders, the local businesses, in the decision making. And then looking at the annual equity audits, that is being done, and ensuring that you train managers for those conversations, as well as difficult conversations, that will come to play. So fairness is contextual across markets. And it also means that you're able to respect, the data and then the context that is coming, that allows those fairness, that a global organization might have presented, to us.
I couldn't agree more. I think when we talk about transparency, there's some CEOs or business leaders who kind of have a visceral reaction because they think it means, disclosing everyone's compensation and every aspect of everyone's compensation to everyone. And obviously it doesn't mean that. So I think you have to define what transparency means to you. For some organizations, it might just be, we're going to start by, being transparent and about our compensation philosophy. For others, it might be, we're going to disclose the pay range for the role and the level that you're in today, or your current level and the level above, right? So I think you have to start somewhere. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing approach. And it's certainly, like Natalie was saying, it's not about dumping salary data on a spreadsheet. It's about intentional disclosure that builds trust. And people need to understand that there's consistency and fairness in how decisions are made and communicated. So this Culture Amp study that I was referring to earlier, they talk about this idea of organizational justice. So when employees think about the fairness of compensation, performance, and promotions, there's 3 types of organizational justice that they're looking for. One is distributive justice, so perceptions of fairness in outcomes or decisions. The other is procedural justice, so perceptions of fairness in the process that determines the outcomes or the process that is used to make the decisions. And then there's interactional justice, so perceptions of fairness around the treatment of people when you communicate those outcomes. So in short, people want to feel that performance and compensation decisions are fair. And in order to feel that fairness, they need to understand the how behind the procedures and the decisions. And that's where a lot of organizations fall short.
Yeah, I would just add on to what where Malvika has left. It's a lot about perception, and one of the very important thing organizations need to focus when they want to do transparency is on education and capability building for middle management. Especially if you're a large organization, we have to ensure that you educate and make your middle management understand what is meant by compensation, what are the pillars that your organization has set up, and why it is happening. Usually, these frameworks and decisions are taken at the executive levels, and then HR is responsible. And business leaders are, some of them depend upon their own interest on the subject. They step into it or they leave it to HR. And that's where the whole issue comes, because if you do not see your middle management being the champions of these principles and really be supportive of what the organization is doing, how much ever frameworks you establish, whatever documents you put in place, that communication and that perception of fairness will not get set up. So this education of the middle management specifically has been a huge learning when I've had, and that's where it is a journey on transparency that you have to establish from baseline assessment of where you stand currently to what steps you will take depending upon your scale and the time as a company you want to invest. Where does it rest in a business strategy? How critical it is at this stage? And if you do not have the time and the bandwidth, having that ambition and just publishing, and this is a mistake a lot of companies do, they put in a lot of concepts and dump it on their team members, and they put it on their intranet portals, and they send emailers, and they expect people to suddenly start believing in it. It does not work like that. They have to have this journey defined with clear checkpoints and invest the time and effort in educating their middle management and gradually pass on their ownership to them from the board and coming to the senior leadership. It has to be passed on. So the decision making, the other part which comes with education is empowerment. So it works extremely well if you pass certain degree of empowerment to your middle management for taking these decisions. Because when they're empowered to take decisions, they will scout for information and they'll try to understand, and it automatically triggers a curiosity and interest and understanding, which leads to transparency.
Thank you
Sarah,
all.
if you would forgive me, just to put in one more comment in less than a minute, it's actually perceived fairness. Even in organizations that are highly transparent, and there was a Mercer study, that says that how you communicate clearly the pay structures and how we made the decisions. So it's how you confidently and consistently deliver the communications that employees remember and they take with them. Because ultimately you want to build trust, among the employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Bukola. Thank you so much. And I would quickly jump on to the next one, which would be one of the interesting ones. So what strategies have helped you explain how compensation decisions are made, especially when everything's more transparent?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off on this one. So in my experience, we've anchored all compensation conversations in our compensation philosophy. If you have a compensation philosophy to start out with, which outlines your kind of principles, your market positioning, and your review processes, that really is the first step. And in my past experience, we also have created compensation FAQ documents and then narrative decks for managers. So as Anjali was saying, that middle manager level is really, really critical. And that the most effective strategy, though, is the storytelling part of it. So here's how we make decisions, here's what's fair, and then here's what's next for you. And in one of my CHRO positions, we rolled out a brand new job architecture, compensation philosophy. We provided rigorous training for managers, starting with the executives. That's a very important group to also bring along on the journey. But after the rollout, we also held open office hours for several weeks after the launch to ensure that we were available to answer manager questions, employee questions. But as we started to receive employee questions, we would deliberately coach managers to lead those conversations and sort of act as the first line of defense on compensation questions. If people are being sent to HR for every compensation question, that's a telltale sign that managers don't understand the comp philosophy. They don't understand how decisions are made and don't feel comfortable talking about it confidently, which means you need to do more to equip them with the right knowledge and tools.
I agree with Malvika here, is that yes, if your managers are sending everybody back to you, there's certainly a gap at some point that needs to be addressed. I would say one of the things, especially in a remote environment where people can't do the pop-in, as I call it, when they would just kind of stick their head in your office if they had a question and come in and chat with you, is that everybody learns in a different way. So making sure that there's a number of different ways this is being communicated, whether it be written, whether it be a mind map versus just a wall of text, making sure managers are having those discussions, having presentations. I think when we rolled it out, we also recorded it so people could go back and watch the presentation. So making sure that there's a number of different mediums and methodologies that people can also gather the information. Some may not want to ask a question in a full company environment, so the office hours are definitely a great way to address that when somebody wants a more one-on-one discussion. So and the FAQs, those I think are crucial, is especially when we get some of the times what we would do is even the questions that would come in on our employee surveys where they would come in anonymously and you couldn't necessarily address that. We would sometimes copy those into our FAQs and answer them there as well as reporting back out, like if there was ongoing questions, say on the compensation side. So we were addressing the kind of questions that maybe one way or another weren't being answered and that we weren't necessarily seeing. So I would say using different ways of getting the information out there and then answering the specific questions that are coming to you and putting it out there so anybody that maybe didn't feel comfortable bringing it up can find out for themselves.
Thank you so much. I wish we really had more time to go on with this discussion. It was amazing and rich, but I know that we are short of time. I'm sorry, Jessa. So this was one rich, grounded, and refreshing conversation I had. And to all our panelists, thank you so much for sharing not just what's working, but also how you've navigated the real, messy middle too. Thank you for sharing that transparently. And to everyone listening, thank you for being here, asking great questions. Our panelists will surely address all those questions offline, and also for learning into this conversation with openness and curiosity. And please don't forget, we're going live in San Diego next week, June 30th. Hacking HR Roadshow, the networking panel, margaritas, and sunshine all on us. So we'll drop the form link in the chat now. And if you're based in San Diego or know someone who should be there, please fill it out or pass it on, and we'll be reaching out shortly. See you all in the next session, and please stay tuned. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hacking HR's Total Rewards and Global Mobility Strategy Summit. Welcome. We're going to dive into conversations over the next 40 minutes about base pay, incentives, and variable compensation models with global experts. Can't wait to meet them. My name is Daniela Page, and I am Hacking HR's Chief Learning Officer, and I'll be your moderator today. We are going to post in the comment section a copy of this summit's free jam-packed Total Rewards and Global Mobility workbook. So please follow along with the workbook. All right, we'll drop it in the comment section. And if you have any questions today for the experts in our panel, please drop them in the comment section so we can keep an eye on it. All righty, let's get started, shall we? Jessica, can you kindly bring our experts to the stage? There you are. Hi, everybody. Nicole, Rich, Lynn, Edgar, nice to see your faces today. I would love for each of you to kind of go around the room and introduce who you are, what you do, and one little question for you. When you think about the role of compensation today, what's the one word that captures how it's evolving in your organization? I'll let you take it away, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Olver. I'm the SVP of Administration for the Nuclear Company. I would say that my one word is intentional. We have a very dynamic market happening today, and I think compensation has to be a lot more competitive, has to be a lot more deliberate, and I think a lot of us are really thinking about designing with that intention to stay agile, equitable, and aligning values, and then the ever-evolving business needs as well. So it's not about being reactive here. We have to be very proactive, especially when we think about how we reward and retain our talent.
Awesome. Great to have you here, Nicole. And over to you, Rich.
Hi, good morning. Rich Bertner. I'm the Senior Director of Compensation for Edward Jones. I would say the one word I would use is transform. As firms are changing, especially any firm that we're part of, we, from a compensation perspective, have to transform with the firm, support the strategy that's ongoing, making it an agile and flexible process. I would say we as compensation experts operate a lot in the gray, and that's what makes us comp experts, right? Is that we can operate in that gray area and support our firms as they are going through transformation.
Nice to have you here, Rich. Thank you. And Edgar.
Hi, everyone. So, my name is Edgar Carrera. I am the former HR director for Mexico and Latin America for Del Monte Foods. Right now, I'm in transition. And talking about compensation, I would say it's a business enabler. You know, it's a way to potentialize the business, not only the business, the results, but the way how the companies or the people is delivering the results. So I see on compensation a potential tool to make or to transform the organizations.
Nice to have you here, Edgar. Thank you. And Lynn.
Yes, hi everyone. Happy to be here. I work for Unimed Maritime Solutions. We provide medical and pharmaceutical supplies to the maritime industry. I would say the one word is adaptive, right? We want the compensation strategy to keep evolving with the business, whether it's the business change, hybrid work, or new expectations. So definitely, I think adaptive is the word I would use.
Love it. Thank you, Lynn, for that. Thanks for being here, everybody. All right, so we've got less than 40 minutes to go. And I have 3 categories of questions. So we have some personalized questions for each of you. Then we have some core questions that I'm just going to open to the floor that you can jump in on and we can have some discussions around. And then we have some closing questions. So if anybody out there online has any questions, please drop them in the comment section. And we as a panel group here will keep an eye on those and try to get those answered by the end of the call. And if not, maybe we can jump in online and help answer those questions for you. All righty. The first question I have is for Richard. Richard, how do you balance market competitiveness with internal equity when designing base pay frameworks around different job levels?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I would say it's not specific again to one firm or another. It's applicable to all firms. One of the things that I've seen or experienced in my 30 years has been we see leaders tend to want to do a couple of things. One is bring in external talent higher than kind of the internal talent. So that's not a question of is it right or is it wrong? It is just, again, I think we've all seen that, right, and experienced that. So the questions that I always kind of propose out or push back to leadership is, what are we doing for those individuals that are internal from a growth, learning, and development perspective? What are we going to do to move them along in terms of a pay continuum? Secondly, I would say is, again, at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that we continue to run into or we see in terms of pay within the firms is, again, market driven, right? We're experiencing a lot of market challenges across the continuum. COVID, for example, kind of made it an employee-based market. And so we're starting to kind of see maybe a downturn of that a little bit at this point in time. So again, wouldn't say that, again, there's one sort of common theme, but I think there's a lot of common themes that I'm starting to see in the market that are driving some of these challenges and issues that we're running into as compensation professionals. But again, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is, from an equity perspective, it's also about the role. And I say that a lot, but I've also seen leaders start to or tend to continue to focus on the people. And we've got to be able to focus on what is the role, what are the roles and responsibilities that are associated with that role, to make sure, again, when you're thinking about job architecture, internal equity of the roles, how those roles are benchmarked externally as well. So those are kind of the two things that I've seen is really about role basis versus people basis. But also, again, we are hiring people in, again, historically that I've seen that are higher than the individuals within the firm. But what are we doing for those individuals within the firm to help them continue to grow and develop? Not a compensation issue, but it is, I kind of liken it to issues that impact compensation versus true compensation issues. I think we can all probably agree that a lot of what we see are issues that impact compensation, probably 90% plus of the time, but leaders continually kind of revert to it's a compensation issue.
Great insight, Rich. Thank you for that. All right, Lynn, in what ways can base pay or incentives be adapted to support an employee's personal or career development goals?
Yeah, I think so. Base pay and or incentives, I think it's a lever to reinforce behaviors and growth that we want to see in our people, right? The employees within the organization. Base pay has to remain market competitive, equitable, right? And so you want to look at incentives as an opportunity to align those business goals with personal development. For example, here at Unimed, we've tied variable comp to cross-functional projects, right? And how looking at stretch projects to go and both contribute to the business goals, and then it gives employees that exposure to what it supports their personal growth, right? So having that conversation, right? Because it's not just about base pay, but it's also about what else can we do for that development, as Rich was talking about, right? It's super important to also listen to the employees, what they want out of the organization, but also making sure that it aligns with those business goals, and how can we do that?
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Edgar, in your experience leading HR across diverse sectors and countries, how would you align variable pay models to performance drivers unique to each business unit or region?
Well, it's an interesting question, but I would say, first of all, compensation models should be linked deeply to the strategy, to the operational priorities, and to the culture. Absolutely. So based on that, you will determine, or need to take in consideration the maturity of the market, depending, because in markets where the company is still having a chance to grow, you need to prioritize the chance to acquire new customers, to improve the profitability, to the acquisition of new customers. In markets where the company has, unstable market, probably you need to focus on, margin excellence, operational costs, things like that. So basically, or depending, if the company is on a transformation process, definitely you need to focus the compensation in order to, reward the behaviors that you want to emphasize into the company. So the things that basically compensation should be modular, adaptable, should be an enabler. So in that way, you can make from compensation a real enabler, not just a tool, but it becomes strategic for the company and for the people, for sure.
Thank you, Edgar, for that. Nicole, how do you approach aligning executive incentives with long-term organizational priorities like sustainability or DEI?
Yeah, I think early on, many companies really approached this work, particularly the DEI and sustainability work, through a values-driven lens. And although that was important, it was separated from the core business drivers. And I think if you really want executives to truly prioritize these areas, you have to operationalize them. You've got to embed them into the incentive structures from the beginning. And that also ties into your decision-making frameworks and the accountability systems, and then how that works at the top will also then determine how it works in the rest of the organization. So, for example, I've worked with compensation committees where we have tied in a portion of the incentive plans or the bonuses to the clearly defined DEI progress, or, that may be around, retention of underrepresented talent, or the measurable improvements in culture scores, or things like that. But I think the same applies to sustainability when you think about the science-based targets, how you track them, and do you track them with the same frequency of which you do the revenue goals? Do you ensure that the board and the C-suite are seeing that progress as a core responsibility? So I don't think you can think about it as a side initiative, and I think a lot of companies who do this very well have really done that, embedding it very clearly. So it really goes beyond the metrics. I think it's about that clarity and consistency, not making them just the soft goals that sit over the top, but really getting that alignment at the board level, and making them those strategic imperatives to build the muscle, to track as well. I'll leave you with a guiding principle. I think, if it matters, you pay for it. If you want it to stick, you measure it. And if you want leaders to own it, you make it part of why they win or lose. And I think that's really, truly how you're going to get behavior change.
Thank you, Nicole. Great insights and examples. Thank you. All righty, folks. Well, we're going to move on to some questions for the whole group. All right, so just jump on in and let's chat. How do you maintain fair and motivating compensation models when different teams have significantly different goals and success metrics?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I think, Danielle, what you hit upon is the goals. The goals are going to be different from market to market, region to region, location to location. As long as the plan is designed from a variable perspective, for example, target-based plans, right? 100% of goal, 80% of goal, 110% of goal. Again, the goals have to be relevant and realistic. Now, we know as compensation professionals, salespeople are never going to agree to the goals, right? There's always going to be that kind of disconnect and kind of pushback. The goals aren't realistic, but these are probably the same sales teams that are doing 120, 140% of plan year over year, right? So there is going to be a little bit of stretch. And I think it's important to make sure that there is a strong partnership with the finance teams when we're designing these plans to ensure that there's, again, parity, but also kind of, again, understanding how those goals link to the plan at the end of the day. So if a plan is appropriately designed, again, the thing that I've seen that has caused plans to fail is the goal setting process, 90% of the time. And again, that's where there has to be that strong partnership with, again, the finance or sales operations or whoever it is, especially if we as compensation professionals are designing those plans. So a target-based plan, I think, levels the field in terms of, again, consistency about how do we pay. What we pay in terms of the goals, that is, again, kind of a separate topic, but again, a very important topic at the end of the day.
And if I can add to that, I think there's a little bit of tailoring to like each department, right? As long as it, aligns with overall strategic goals of the business, right? And so you want to make sure, for example, here at Unimed, we don't have the same targets and the same metrics for sales that we do for R&D or someone in operations, right? For our warehouse personnel. So those are not the same, right? And also calibration, right? You want to make sure that you're looking at it, not just, every couple of years, but at a minimum, at least every year. And then here we do it every 6 months, because Unimed is constantly evolving, right? The business is constantly evolving. We're constantly adapting and being agile and nimble to make sure that the metrics and the things and the goals that we set in place, because like Rich said, goals are super, super important, that it's still relevant when we set them back in January. Are they still relevant today?
Yeah, well, if possible, I would like just to add, based on the experience I have, that you should be in touch with finance, but also with sales. So in that way, you can review on, for example, when you're talking about the sales compensation for sales, you need to be how the program is connected with the with the customer. So in that way, you can provide a proper tracking, and also to link the target goals, the profitability goals, for example, the cost reduction if you're talking about manufacturing. So in that way, you will see how they will these initiatives will impact the final result with the final customers. So that way, you can improve profitability for the company, and for sure for the people, they will be able to make more money, and also the company will become more profitable.
Yeah, I love this conversation around the tying of goals. I think, Rich brought this up, and it's so deeply intertwined. And I think a lot of us who've been doing this work for a long time, we used to have a lot longer lead time on the goal setting processes. And you'll see all of us now have really bounced that back up. And, most of us, I think a lot of us are really looking at quarterly sections now. We're really looking at, okay, this market is just too dynamic. What is affecting it is happening too quickly. We really need to make sure that these goals are still relevant, that they're achievable, because if we're tying compensation to that, we have to have the same agility. And I think it's worth pointing out, when you tie that back into compensation and we're talking about fairness and the motivating factors, I think we have to look at that internal equity and effort and impact, not sameness. And I think that's where some of this gets a little twisted. Each team will get that tailored, structured alignment to what drives the success in their function. But all models and everything that we build has to be built on a shared principle of fairness, of that clarity, and then the performance alignment, which only happens if you're rechecking back at those goals quite regularly. So I think you're seeing a lot of companies do that right now, and they're the ones that have really healthy compensation structures. And that's where you're going to get your fairness from.
That's great. Great job answering that question, guys, as a team. The next question, I like this one. What role does pay transparency play in your organization, and how do you handle potential resistance to it?
I'll jump in. I'll start this one. For us, I think if you think about what is transparency, the transparency of pay is going to build the trust, right? So I think the biggest mistake many of us probably have made, or companies have made, is really creating a kind of cloud and this sort of allure around compensation, where it was kind of, we didn't talk about it. It was the thing that HR did behind the curtain and finance kind of spoke about, and you'd get this conversation once a year and then you'd kind of roll back behind the curtain. Where I think a lot of the work that we've been doing and a lot of us have been leading is really demystifying pay. And I think, a lot of us have really introduced a lot clearer frameworks. I put up the compensation playbook day one of building the business, and it's there from the minute one, and we train our managers on it so they know how to talk about comp. It isn't just an HR conversation. Everyone has to have the confidence around comp to take away some of the sting that I think has historically been there, and the distrust. We inherit some of the sins of companies and where people have come from, but then it's our job to rewrite that story and to make comp a more normalized part of the conversation. And I think by providing how you do compensation, where you get your compensation data from, when do compensation moments happen, providing that why is going to help rebuild this conversation. And I find that any sort of resistance starts to fade when people feel informed. It's not this hidden thing. I think we've had a few market moments where you've had pay transparency. If you look at the US, we have to advertise compensation in a lot of markets now when we're making people apply for roles. And I think that has helped a lot, because people are suddenly see, oh, that person's getting paid the same as I am. Great. Okay. And then in the company, you're seeing a lot more openness around compensation, and the company's talking about compensation. So I have definitely seen the heat decreased dramatically by just being a lot more open about this and making it a part of managers training, onboarding. You know, we talk about it in onboarding, like it's part of the conversation that you will expect to hear about compensation, not just that once or twice a year, but as a regular cadence.
And maybe just to kind of add into what Nicole was saying is not specific to current organization, but I think it's also important to understand where the firm is in terms of their maturity around pay. You can't go into a very immature firm and start to assume that everybody understands how compensation works, right? What I've seen work well in other firms where they're maybe lower on the maturity curve is building a foundational sort of process and education and understanding for leaders. It starts, and I think I heard it in the last panel discussion, it's got to start with the top, right? We need to make sure leaders understand how, what, when, where, why compensation is utilized, leveraged, et cetera, and then slowly disseminate it down through the leaders at the end of the day to create that awareness, that understanding. And as Nicole mentioned, we start to see as people start to understand compensation and the levers that can be utilized, it starts to kind of create an openness, a more open dialogue that we see amongst leaders. But also, again, as Nicole mentioned in the US, right, I can't tell somebody they can't talk about pay to their peers, right? You just can't do that. So there is that transparency that starts to evolve in firms. But again, I'd say it's dependent upon, again, that maturity curve, right? Firms that are very mature maybe are doing it a little bit better, but they probably all started in the same spot, right? A foundational sort of education, understanding, and awareness for leadership, and then continue to iterate and evolve that.
I was just thinking from the employee perspective, equipping employees how, when to have conversations about their compensation with their manager. So food for thought. All righty, I've got another question. As workforce expectations evolve, how are you customizing compensation to attract and retain top talent, especially for Gen Z and millennials?
Okay, I'll take it. Okay, so you know it depends as Richard says, based on the maturity of the company, but definitely you need to adapt the compensation programs. I'm not talking about only variable compensation, also base pay, also benefits. So you need to define an internal strategy. So in that way, you can cover all the requirements or the necessities of the new generations. But definitely, I think the key is coming from the way how you can explain, because most of the time the compensation programs are, well, on my experiences, that are designed to be understandable for the finance people, for the HR people, and eventually for the managers. But sometimes the deployment is not correctly, is not done correctly with the employees, especially with the new generation. So they will not be able to see how they can impact on the business results, or to get the results, or be able to reach the goals and make the money they are expecting from the program. So I think the key is from the deployment, the communication, and eventually if you can run some kind of focus groups, incorporating that feedback, you can create more effective compensation programs for the new generations.
I think there's also something to be said about, being transparent, right? And making sure that you have that alignment with the business. And that way employees truly understand, okay, if I want to get to this salary, right, I need to do these things, right? So we kind of talked about job leveling and what, making sure that compensation aligns with the role rather than it be people first, right? It's really the exercise of what does the job entail? What are the levels within the job, and making sure that that is well defined, right? People want to have a blueprint, for their careers, and be able to look at that from that angle to say, okay, if I want to go and be a manager, I need to be able to do these things and accomplish these things. Or here in the US, right, my salary is this, but if I want, to go and transfer to another region, my salary is going to be that. And how does that, work for me in my lifestyle, and how can I, succeed in the organization?
Maybe just to tie into that, Lynn, as well, I think what you just mentioned is there also has to be a clear kind of connection to the talent function as well. So people can understand, okay, if I'm going to be a manager versus a senior manager, director, senior director, what does it take? What does good or great look like? What are the, again, roles and responsibilities? if I'm entry level manager versus entry level senior manager, the skills and the requirements are going to be different. And I think that's also very important to make sure that it's not seen as compensation driving this, but it's a partnership. Because again, at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, everything becomes a compensation issue, right? And I think it's really important that we're aligning with our talent partners to make sure that they're helping kind of say, okay, step one is this, step two is this, and then how do we line that up from, say, an architecture perspective at the end of the day as well.
I think it's important too to listen to that generation that you're trying to attract, right? Like go and ask them, work out and, have that conversation, because it's a younger generation. They have different needs and considerations. They may not be thinking about the 401k or, the parental leave policies right now. Some do, but a lot aren't. They're just trying to pay their bills. They're trying to, get student loan off their back, if particularly in the US markets and things like that. So I think, if you look at what is drawing this level of talent, is a lot of it's the purpose-driven work, right? They need it to matter. This is important, particularly with the environment that they are inheriting. I think you're seeing a lot of demand for authentic leadership. And as we talked a lot about transparency around the company, they really are craving that. I think if you look at the other drivers, they're looking for flexibility. They don't want that formal, boxed in, way in which they can do work. They're demanding more flexibility, which I'm totally here for and love. I think mental health and well-being, that has definitely increased in their drivers when you think about benefits programs, and skills development. They want to learn. We have a very curious and hungry generation, and it's our job to help make sure that they don't just come in off their skill set, that we have programs and things that will help develop those skills and give them the ability to pivot within the business, not just for what they came in for, but they can see those tracks. And that's where those leveling guidelines and all of the other things we're talking about start to tie in. But you've got to paint a vision of how they can grow. That's what's going to keep them as well. Because if we're not doing that, you're going to lose them to another company who is doing those types of things well. And I think also, let's tie in now tech, right? If you're doing something cool, if you're using a lot of the modern tech systems, that's their language. We have to make sure that we're matching how they talk. And I think tech is their world, and we have to make sure as a business we're using where they can succeed, which is their language. So there's a couple of drivers, but baseline, let's just talk to the people we're trying to hire and see what drives them, so we can tailor our programs as well.
Right. And if we have any Gen Z millennials listening in today, you tell us in the chat, what are you looking for? And hopefully our panelists can jump into the chat after this and kind of engage in some conversation, because I think there are some really great questions in there that I hope we all get to tackle. All righty. I have another question. Can you share how you've used variable pay to drive strategic transformation, such as digitalization, restructuring, or cultural change beyond just rewarding results?
Well, basically what I can share with you, it's when I was working for Stanley Black & Decker, in fact, it was an interesting journey because I need to go back to 2016, where we were implementing AI solutions for supply chain, sales, marketing. So on that time, right now, AI is a trend topic, and we have a lot of technology. But in that time, it was not necessarily something that everybody knows. So we started to implement variable compensation programs that incentivize the digital transformations. In that way, we started to link these programs not only to the adoption of the digital tools, transformation in terms of training, but also how to engage the customers with these initiatives. So in that way, the result it was that we defeated the resistance to change. Also, we incentivized the development of new skills, but also it allowed us to grow the business and for the customers to increase the profitability. So in that way, everybody was making the result the goal. The customers were improving profitability, the company also, but the people was driving the transformation. So basically, it allowed us to potentialize the behaviors that we want to emphasize in the company. So right now with the new technologies that we have, I think it's easier. But this is the case I would like to share with you.
Okay, anyone else want to jump in on Edgar's response? All right, we'll jump into the next one. How do you ensure your incentive or variable compensation programs stay relevant during times of economic uncertainty or rapid change?
I think Nicole mentioned this as well. And Lynn kind of reinforced it is, again, there has to be that close proximity or that partnership to understand, the plans that are set out in January are not the plans that you see March, April timeframe, right? So it's almost like a rolling forecast, making sure that we're updating that, but we're also creating that transparency. I continue to hear that over and over, and that's important. Salespeople or individuals in general don't like changes. So if we're ending up changing goals or targets, when do we do that? How do we do that? Why do we do that? That's critically important. But again, in the same token, a firm cannot say, hey, we planned for this, but something transpired from a macroeconomic perspective we had absolutely no control over, and now we're creating windfalls, right, at the end of the day. And, on the flip side, we also have to be aware of shortfalls that can occur because of those macroeconomic conditions as well. I think, Lynn, you said it well, agility, right? We have to be agile. We have to be adaptable. We have to create that transparency that as a firm or as an organization, we are going to keep close proximity on those changes, and we may change. And I know it's boilerplate language that you see in a lot of plan documents. The firm may change it, with or without notice. But the reality is we should be sharing changes to associates that have negative impact, whereas, on a positive impact, maybe not so much, right? We don't maybe not have to go through that as much as we would if, hey, this is going to put a 10% kind of reduction in your earnings. And why are we doing that? So again, I think there's got to be that close proximity to kind of the entire ecosystem at the end of the day to make sure that we're, again, explaining it, but also keeping agile and adaptable as well.
Yeah, it's the flexibility, right? Like, I think that's the biggest takeaway, I think, for this answer is really, and, Rich has been articulating perfectly, is really just to build in the scenario-based targets, having a mixture of both long-term and short-term with the ability to adapt quickly. I think a lot of us as leaders have been trained right now in very weird times. We've had to adapt to a lot of things very quickly, but maybe that's made us stronger, and we've got a bit more muscle now to be able to scenario plan this a bit better. But I really think the long-term, short-term, making sure you have a balance of both, keeping those incentives tied to what the business and people need right now, but also looking around the corner as well. And the balance is what will help you, and that will build that flexibility as well.
Yeah, and I think it also needs to be relevant, right? Responsive and human, right? We need to make sure that we're maintaining that human element to all of this, right? It needs to be able to flex with the business, right? But we still need to acknowledge employee contributions and how it continues to drive the performance of the organization. Without the employees, right, we don't have an organization. So even in the tough times, we need to make sure that we can flex, but we also communicate, right, why we're doing these things, right? We may not be able to communicate all the things, but as much as we possibly can to at least have that level of transparency and at least for employees to at least understand it.
Thank you, Lynn. I've got one question left, just in the time we have, a few minutes left. And I think this is on a lot of people's minds. How are you thinking about compensation in the context of hybrid versus fully remote workforces? Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just say this, and welcome the thoughts from my peers here, is it's really cost of labor. Right. At the end of the day, I know a lot of people continue to focus on cost of living, but, cost of labor does take that into a little bit of consideration. So people that are living in New York, for example, their cost of labor is going to be a little bit higher than what we would see for somebody, say, in Nashville, Tennessee, or maybe a different market, et cetera. That to me is where my focus is really what is the cost of labor at the end of the day. Is our talent strategy more on a national basis, or is it are we focusing on specifically, we want people in a corporate office? What does that look like in terms of kind of the geographic area at the end of the day? But I would say a lot of firms are taking the approach of really focusing on a national talent strategy and finding the best talent, but understanding the best talent, you're going to pay a little bit more for somebody in New York than you are going to pay for somebody in the Midwest, just because of the cost of labor that's associated with that. And I think that's sometimes a difficult conversation when leaders are looking at a group of individuals or associates that they have that could be a mixture of in-office, hybrid, or home-based associates, right? Virtual, because they're looking at it just on a pure facial value. You're going to see differences, but you also have to understand why those differences exist.
Anyone else want to jump in?
I agree, right? So we need to make sure that we're looking at how employees create value, right? And so not all positions are able to be fully remote, right? May not be able to be hybrid, right? Here we have warehouse workers, right? That job can't be remote. So how do you ensure that they understand that there's value in what they do, right? And that we're not kind of overlooking the fact that there's this benefit of being able to work remote or hybrid, or that we're giving something that they're not receiving, right? Look at all of those things to be able to ensure that everyone within the organization feels valued and heard.
Thanks for that, Lynn. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? Just another minute left.
Maybe just to add, depending on the philosophy of the company, because definitely, the cost of labor is an important aspect, but also the philosophy of the company and what the company wants to emphasize. It's just a compliment.
Great. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you to everyone in our panel today. I think we could continue the conversation for another 40 minutes. No problem. And we've got some great questions in the chat. So if I could ask our experts today to maybe hop into the chat a little later and maybe take care of some of those questions, I'm sure our audience would appreciate it. So everybody, the next panel in the Total Rewards and Global Mobility Strategy Summit is executive compensation and leadership rewards. So that's coming up in just a few moments. So please stay tuned. And if you are an HR professional in the San Diego area on June the 30th, Hacking HR is going on the road, and we've got an event happening that day. So if you check out in the comments just in a few moments, you will see a link to a Google form if you would like to sign up and join Hacking HR and beyond during the Hacking HR Roadshow happening in San Diego. As well, I just want to say, please follow along to these panels with our Summit Workbook, which will also be linked in the comments and all over our LinkedIn page. So thank you all, Nicole, Rich, Lynn, Edgar, for joining us today. Thank you. It was great to meet you guys, and we'll catch you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Total Rewards and Global Mobility Strategy Summit. We add words all the time to our titles. We're so glad to have you here. My name is Lauren Lefkowitz. I am an executive coach and fractional HR professional, and I am so excited to lead this topic because I think it's going to be a really exciting conversation. We have amazing panelists coming to the stage in a moment. We're going to be talking about executive compensation and leadership rewards, which can be a yawn, but also when you're talking to the experts, you're going to get some really amazing insights today on how to manage executive compensation and leadership rewards, how to make it actually feel rewarding, what the trends are, et cetera. So I'd love to welcome our panelists to the stage so that we can get this really rich conversation started. Welcome in, everybody. So excited to have you here with us today. Just a note to please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking so that we reduce echo. And I'm just gonna have a walk around the room and ask you to introduce yourselves, tell us where in the world you are and what you do for work and why this topic is interesting to you. And we'll start with Cindy and then just sort of go around in a circle from there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy. I am actually located in California. I am currently the HR manager for a manufacturing firm. And the reason why this topic is important is because it's crucial to keep our employees, to retain them, to be able to provide a way of giving back to them in some way, shape, or form other than just monetarily.
Go ahead, Jess. We'll just go around the room and then we'll come back and start questions.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Goldberg. I'm a top-ranked executive coach, a company trainer, and I teach leadership and communication skills at Columbia University. I'm really excited to be talking about this. This is an incredibly important topic. You know, I've sat on both sides of the table. So I work with high-level executives when they are job searching, helping them negotiate to get the best deal for themselves. And I also work with executive teams on the other side when they're trying to bring people in. And once they brought people in, coaching them and helping them have the right systems for development and for growth. So I think it's a really important thing because, you know, the top level leadership often influences the entire strategy, the entire culture of the organization, and where the organization ultimately goes. So we have to think critically about how are we bringing the right people in? What are we offering to them? And what are we offering that's fair, that makes the people below them also see that what we're giving to the person is right and not overblown for what we're offering.
Yep, just keep going. Everybody just unmute yourself to introduce yourself. So we're going to have a really open discussion today. We'll just pay attention to the mute button. When you're ready to talk or answer a question, you can just come off of mute so that we can be more in discussion than kind of Q&A. So either one of you, go ahead.
All right. It's going to be ladies first, then the gentlemen last. My name is Petronilla Omundo. I am based in Kenya. I am the Group Planning and Development Manager at Sarova Hotels. And happy to be here. Why? Because everything either breaks or is made by the leadership. And what happens at the top shape or happens down. And that's why I thought this was a very important one for me. So that I contribute to this and share my thoughts on how to ensure that organizations are building psychological safety, even as they do rewards, because I think that's something that usually misses. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, good evening, or depending on where you are in the world. My name is David van Nochem. By the way, Petron, I love your hotels. I stay often in Kenya, really good. But I'm actually based in Dubai since about 16 years, originally from the Netherlands. Got a career of corporate HR behind me, including companies like IBM, IDEMIA, Cognos, etc., where I had to deal also with executive comp. Back in 2019, I decided to build my own company, very much focused around people, data, and technology. It's called Augmented Workforce, so we do a lot of AI stuff. But I'm also on the board of one of the oldest family-owned businesses here in Dubai. It's called Al Ghurair Group, and I'm the chairman of the Human Capital Committee, but it's more or less the ARC, as you would know it. And this is also where we discuss a lot of exec comp and all the different elements. So I'm really excited to share my experience in the Middle East with the topic of executive compensation and leadership rewards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And just as we go along, let's talk as free form as possible and just come on in. So I'll start with our first question. And I know some of you work specifically in the US, some of you work globally. So if you can share as you're sharing, like whether you're talking about globally or a specific country, that would be helpful, I think, for our listeners. So our first question is, what are the current challenges that you're seeing with executive compensation and leadership rewards? What's happening out there that makes this a really juicy topic to talk about?
Any of us? Any of us. Okay, let me kick off. One of the things that I've seen in the Middle East is the kind of like if you look at executive comp, you often have you have the basic, you've got the variable, and you've got the long-term incentive plan. And the long-term incentive plan is something, I would say, relatively new to the UAE, to the wider region. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen around that. Like, what is it? Like, for example, I did an audit on an LTIP for a publicly listed company here in the UAE. And there were a lot of elements that were not clear. It was also kind of like, when you look at the pay mix, people think it's on top, and it actually should be part of the pay mix for an executive. So these kind of elements, I feel like were not as advanced. The other thing what is very specific for this region is if you look at the larger companies, they are often family owned. We have a lot of family owned businesses that really have come up and have become massive companies, but their pay philosophy is very different. Let me not say anything else, but very different what you would see, what I saw in Europe. I worked for Canadian company, American companies, very different setup, and not by design necessarily. It's more because it still has to go through the evolution and understand why you, for example, need long-term incentive planning and what is the purpose. So you see a lot of, for example, that even in the design, you see sometimes that there is double payment on the same element, what is not really how it should be. Anyway, let me pause here. Yeah.
I had a boss who liked to say that think globally, act locally. So what challenge am I seeing in terms of executive comp and rewards at the moment would be things to do with transparency and equity. A lot of execs do not want equity, not one, but do not project or do not show, do not want to practice, much as a lot of pay is out there. I know using all the forums that people get salaries and of course all compensation and all rewards. There's everything in the out, but nothing in the out. I don't know if they get what I'm saying. So there's no equity and fairness and transparency in terms of compensation, and sometimes it gets personal to being paid for. I don't know how I can put this, but there's no transparency in terms of pay, which is one thing I think we should have as execs, so that life is made easier even for you, because if it's out there, then there's no noise being made. Yes, again, you may say that if it's out there, there's going to be noise because people want to get to the level of everyone else. But my thoughts as well on that is, if it is out, then we keep improving, yeah, because you're thinking locally, acting globally. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love what you were just saying. You know, I think that that's one of the big things in the US. So there's kind of three big buckets when I think about challenges that we're seeing right now in executive comp and rewards. The first one is a major push in the US, particularly to more transparency. There's a lot of states that have put in laws that we have to have pay transparency when people are hiring. And that creates multiple challenges. That creates challenges on the side of the employees who are, asking, why is this comp justified for that level of executive? So the HR leaders now have to justify, and the board has to justify the price point that they're paying for executives. But there's also now competition, because now as people are having, transparency on what the point that they could be getting at other organizations, they have more leverage to negotiate. So pay transparency is one of the first things that we're seeing. The second thing that we're seeing is boards and, the other executive teams wanting to align the compensation with the value that's going to be created. So as they look at bringing someone in, they're like, how do we align what this person is going to bring in with long-term values so that they stay for a long time? So sorts of incentives we want to have, rather than just having single-year bonuses. How are we aligning it towards KPIs? Are they getting money that's not just a salary base, but now based on metrics that they're delivering on? So aligning with value is the second one. And then the third one that I'm seeing is really, we have a lot of volatility in the market right now. And we are seeing, a rise in increase in salaries. And so what we see with that is employees and more people who are coming into an executive role who want a higher level salary, but current executive teams and boards that are a little bit hesitant to hire and to pay those amounts, because they're a little bit worried about the volatility. Where's the market going to be? Can we afford this in the long term? Maybe that's okay for us today. Is that okay for us tomorrow? So the three key challenges I'm seeing right now, and of course there's a lot more, but the three key ones are really the challenges with transparency and wanting that to be possible right now, but then also what the challenges are with justifying that, aligning value with what you're giving people, and then the one being around the volatility of the market and what that brings right now for executive compensation.
I don't think I could add anything else to it. I mean, I think we've covered pretty much every single aspect of it right now.
Great, thank you. So as we start to talk about this this conversation, what role, for those of you who have worked in public companies or companies with engaged stakeholders, board members, what are the challenges that you see in convincing those folks that your plans, your compensation and leadership reward plans need to be rich and robust? What are the challenges that you're seeing, and how do you talk to those stakeholders about implementing what needs to be implemented in order to attract and retain talent?
I can start off on that one. So really what we need to be thinking about is when we are trying to, did you want to go, David?
No, please go ahead. I went first last time.
Okay, so when we're trying to think about how do we decide what the right amount is that we're going to give, and then if the amount we want to give is more than the board or the other people that we're trying to talk to are, maybe we found a candidate that we're really excited about, and what they need is they're negotiating with us and they're asking for something much higher. How do we go back and leverage and negotiate for that amount? Well, first of all, we need to understand the market and understand what our other companies in our same scope pay. If this person is asking for a crazy high amount, and actually what the other companies in your scope are paying is not that amount, then maybe we need to consider that. So really understanding first, is the amount we're thinking about paying right? Because what we don't want to do is stratify some of our employees on, they're doing the groundwork to our executive level and have a really big stratification between the pay. If they're actually bringing in that kind of value, then we have to go back and we have to talk to the board and the other people. We have to talk to them about the value this person is going to add and why we think they are going to add this kind of value to the company. We need to talk about it in terms of ROI, because we never want to hire someone that we're going to be paying them, way more than what the value they're bringing to the company. That's never what a board wants. We have to show how this person bringing this person in, the kind of package that we're giving them is actually really fair, and talking about fairness and equity. And also it's going to be commensurate with the value that they're going to drive for the company. And to be able to showcase what's the ROI that we think this person might be able to bring and why. And how these specific things that we want to offer are going to help this person stay and do their best work.
Okay. In the Middle East, and I'm talking about places like UAE, Qatar, to a certain extent Saudi Arabia, we most employees are kind of what you would consider expats, but in reality we're actually staying longer in the Middle East, but we're not from the nationality from the country that we live in. It also means that if you look at benchmarks, often when I talk about executive compensation with other companies, they're talking about the company next door, the company in Dubai, like that they know from another, for example, family, or the company like in Abu Dhabi compared to Dubai. But the reality is that a lot of these senior executives, we're competing with the globe. When I worked for one of the tech companies here, I was dealing with a head of data science, and data science was around that time really popular. Like, it was hard to find a chief kind of like data science officer. I did some benchmarking, and then he said, your benchmark doesn't make sense, because I get approached by companies in California. I get approached like, I'm not stuck here, like I can go anywhere. And I think that's the kind of like, where do you benchmark against, is some challenge that we have. And even sometimes even as simple that our neighboring country, Saudi Arabia, one of our neighboring countries, like Saudi used to pay better than the UAE. I think now they're nibbling up, but like, it's really important to make sure that you have your scope right when you compare and when you create your package for executive leadership, and even non-executive leadership, by the way. That's another topic. Yeah.
I also think that one of the other things that we have to look at or provide is maybe perhaps, what if we cannot provide that compensation, but we can do it in other forms of an incentive, right? Let's say, for example, some might say, I don't know, just trying to throw an example out there, but I would like to have 1 day from home. And that's already a reward in itself, because let's say, for example, they have something going on or they need that particular 1 day, right? So I think just being able to have that flexibility, to be able to not just solely focus on the compensation, but other items that perhaps they might need, in some cases. What if, let's say, I know in some parts of the world, they can even do like a daycare, right? They can do an stipend for a daycare. They can do stipend for education. Just things of that nature that perhaps might be additional motivators for those individuals, not just the compensation piece. If we're not able to afford additional compensation, because like Jess was talking about, what if the market isn't showing, or what's out there, it's not comparable. They're trying to get more than even what our competitors are paying. But this would be another way of being able to retain them if we believe that they're going to bring, that extra value to the company.
Very good points. I'd chime in by saying I'd approach it from the talent expectations aspect, because the talent right now is very global. You can work from anywhere, really. And to win in this workplace, really, we must win. We must just win across the market so that we can be able to retain. And the current talent is looking for a lot of things. They're looking for purpose. They're not only looking for the pay, and they can dump that job if you don't meet their purpose, if you don't align with them. So those are some of the things I'd look at to make sure that we have these people in the workplace and convince the board or the key stakeholders in getting the people that we need to get in our workplace. Yeah.
I kind of agree that we see more and more shifts towards the non-financial elements of rewards and compensation. And even in a cash-driven country, we don't have many benefits. It's all kind of well, we have benefits, but they're different than in some other parts of the world, like housing allowances and stuff like that. But it's kind of clubbed together it's still cash-based. It's largely cash-based. But you see more and more people saying well, I can earn more, but that means that I see my family less. And especially the Middle East is very much work hard, play hard kind of environment. We have a nice kind of we have beautiful hotels, nice beaches, etc. But at the same time, we also work extremely hard. And some people kind of start seeing that money doesn't give them the best option, especially in certain phases of their life. Like the time or quality of life or whatever it is more important. So yeah, but I don't see a massive shift yet in how especially executive packages are designed. I would say in general, we see more and more flexibility. There are companies that are working 4.5 days a week, Fridays off, or Friday afternoons off, or they allow for working from home. But on the executive side, it's not really the case. It's you're hired to do the job, and you're basically, we expect you to be always on and always work. And for some people, that's not satisfying enough anymore.
Amazing. Thank you. So I think that with all of your expertise, sometimes we who have had experience in this make an assumption that people know where to go to look for best practices, to look for compensation information and data, to be able to evaluate what's going to work for their companies. So can you each share a little bit in the places where you are working, in the countries that you're working with, where do you go to find compensation and rewards data?
I would start benchmarking is one thing I quickly do. One thing I didn't say about me is that I'm also a HR practitioner. So while right now I'm in learning and development, when I need to present this data at any point, benchmarking across the hospitality, and again, my first statement: think globally, act locally. So yes, I'd look for what is going to make sense for me here, as opposed to taking everything, and some things may not fit with my current everything, current position or requirements, or even I can't afford. So I can't take everything and copy and paste directly. So yes, get the benchmarks properly. Once I get the benchmarks from other hospitality places, then I implement what needs to be implemented. That is one. Of course, maybe someone can add in as I before I finish everything else. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. So for us, if I look at the region, we use the main providers, and I don't want to call out all the names, but it's KF and it's all the other ones that are kind of like collecting data. Having said that, if you really want to get an insight, you need to have it often from your peers. So Bernella, you were talking about hospitality. You want to compare really hospitality. You want to know what people are really doing, not just only what they fill in the surveys, but what is really happening. What I have done since I came to the UAE was 16 years ago. I always worked on building communities. So there is a community in the high-tech space, HR in the high-tech space, the likes of IBM, Google, but also some more local companies. We have built another community around HR. And one of the best ways of kind of like benchmarking is having that kind of like peer-to-peer discussion. Obviously, we don't share spreadsheets with benchmark data, but it's like in the UAE and also in the neighboring countries, there's only private schooling for children. So companies used to pay, it's becoming a little bit less, but they used to pay for the private schooling for the children of the employees. And that's something that you don't want to keep increasing, or you don't want to compete with it. So you absolutely want to know, like, what are our peers paying and what are they kind of like up to? Are they increasing or not? Because people are comparing. So for me, to benchmark also on the executive side is to have some buddies in your community is extremely important. Yeah.
I quite agree with that. Yeah.
I would also say even your job posting locations, right? Like your your Glassdoor, for the US, and any of those that you actually utilize, they do have like benchmarking. Even LinkedIn has a form of it as well, that you can utilize for it. And then nowadays we also have AI, right? So you can type it in and it can give you another whole set, if you don't have that network, like David was saying, and you don't have the other strategies. Those are some other options.
Those are some great options. I'm just going to add a couple more ones. She's mentioning Glassdoor is an awesome one. Looking up, just in the US particularly, a lot of states are required to give the salary bands for a role. You can be able to very easily type in the name of the role that you are, trying to hire for, and you can very easily see what other competitors that are in your space are hiring for that role, if they've hired for it recently, even if the job posting is closed. If it is posted, you might see it. Another really amazing tool is called fairoffer.ai. Typically, I use that with my clients who I'm coaching on the other side, where they're trying to negotiate for what's fair for them. But fairoffer.ai is an awesome platform. You can type in the role, how large the company is, what series it's at, and you can kind of get an understanding of the benchmark of what's being offered at that level. The other thing that's really awesome is topstartups.io. And this is where real people are entering in what they are getting paid, what kind of equity compensation So not just, the financial salary number, but also the equity and the percentage of equity. And so these are, real individuals that have entered in their salary. So you can see what it looks like at, a variety of series of levels, depending on whether the company is public or whether it is, a Series C company or a Series B company. You can be able to figure that out and look at what, companies in your same size and market and, offering of role might be offering.
Thank you. So when you think about the incentives, the incentive programs, the financial programs, and the non-financial rewards that you've seen really work, that have helped to retain people in companies and organizations that are doing other things right as well, but what are the things that you've seen, financial or non, that really keep people? And let's get as specific as possible, because we'll have folks in our audience today who know this stuff and are looking for a couple of tips here and there. And we'll have folks in our audience today who are just starting at the ground level of understanding how executive compensation and leadership rewards work. So as specific as you can get about the best and brightest incentives and comp out there.
I'm a little biased here on this one particularly, but one of the best things that I personally see as an executive coach is offering executive coaching, because the higher someone gets up in a leadership role, the fewer mentors they have, the fewer people that they have who are cheering them on. The higher up you get in a role, the more you are likely to be dehumanized, the more you're likely to be criticized by those underneath you. And it can be really helpful for those coming into an executive role, especially if they are new or a first-time executive, or if there's any challenges. And even if they're doing really well, offering them sustainable long-term coaching that allows them to see how they can grow and develop as a leader helps people be like, oh, this is a place I want to stay at because it's allowing me to grow. It's allowing me to feel like I can do my job better. It helps them work through problems that they might have, whether that's relationship problems with other people on the executive team, conflict resolution. It helps them deal with giving hard feedback to their employees, helps them deal with all the things that might be higher stress levels for them, helps lower and helps work through some of those things. So I see a lot of executives really value that as a perk and as something that helps them feel like, oh, this is a place that's really investing in me, not just financially, but in helping me grow as a leader.
I kind of agree on that. Good friend of mine is doing executive transition coaching, and he always comes with the numbers that probably 30 to 40% of C-level placements kind of fail. And that's not because the 30-40% is bad, but it's because we don't really give them the right support and the right kind of coaching to land that. On another note, I would say if I listen to people, what makes them potentially leave an organization is its culture. A lot of organizations, although you would say if you are, for example, the CEO, you influence culture massively. Culture is very hard to change, and it takes a lot of time. And sometimes you're just stuck in this kind of type of working that is not really yours. And I was talking about family businesses that we have here, etc. And sometimes people get appointed in very senior roles, but actually there is somebody, let's say the ownerships, the shareholders that are still overlooking it over your shoulder, or the family is still overstepping. So the true empowerment, and I don't say that that's necessarily in the company that I'm on the board committee for, but in general, I've seen it a lot, where people don't feel empowered, where they get overstepped by the ultimate ownership of the company. And this is a transition that a lot of companies in the Middle East are going through to move from traditionally family-owned, family-managed companies into more what I would call a professional setup with a proper governance and a kind of an executive team. But if you're still in the first part, even if you're very experienced, you might feel very unhappy or lonely or kind of disappointed or whatever it is. And yeah, so these are the three things outside of money that really matter.
I would add I actually really love the coaching, and I liked what you said, David, that a lot of people would fail just because not because they don't know the job, but because they just don't get the support they need to they need to get for them to excel in the role. So that's a nice one, actually. Others I'd think about are, of course, having a good environment. And to add into what you said, as I started as well, I said one thing that is either keeping people or not is psychological safety. And a lot of people would stay in an organization if they feel they can contribute or challenge situations, or they are free to share and they can learn. Yeah. So yes, it's not reward. It is not anything monetary, but it's the environment that is created to make sure that you're not leaving people. Because as I say, people leave people. They don't leave good organizations. I'm also very proud to be working in an organization that has very high retention. And some of the things that keep people is, of course, the presence of psychological safety. But I know the times we lose people as well, it's due to poor management of people. So creating a nice environment for people to thrive is a key thing for me. Another one would be, of course, long-term incentive plans and even having it in cash. So for any good performance achieved, then you reward in big cash bonuses, and that's I've also seen keeps people in organizations as a big one, actually, as a big incentive to have people in an organization. So yes, the short-term incentive plans, long-term incentive plans, but maybe giving it out in cash. Yeah.
So what I would add to it is definitely the stock options when you do have those stock options, right, that you guys can provide. But when you don't, sometimes just meeting them in the point of need is what I found that has helped with retention. It could be something as simple as adding additional medical plans to your already, benefit healthcare benefits that you already offer, just being able to actually add on top of those, or maybe perhaps, like I had mentioned, a daycare stipend, or that I've also seen has helped. And I think really just more focusing it on what the need is, right? Where exactly, because it's not a one size fits all. Some stuff might, like the daycare, you can have the program, but if they don't have kids, it's not going to benefit them. So there's no real incentive there. So, but maybe perhaps they want to further their education. And so just having that other stipend that perhaps, is going to help them out. So I think it's just kind of really depending on the candidate or the employee, the executive that you have. It really goes a long way if you meet them in their point of need, because it shows them that you want to make sure that they know that and they understand that they're valuable to you. They are an asset, and therefore you're protecting your assets and you're taking care of your assets.
It's interesting, by the way, how the regional differences are there. Like daycare, if I think about Kenya, if I think about Dubai, we have domestic stuff. It's not really something that is really kind of like we have nannies, and it's not something that people are really looking for from an employer perspective, because the things are differently arranged. So yes, we have massive differences. Medical plans are maybe more, although here the government mandates pretty good medical plans in general. So we kind of like don't really have that issue either. But yes, there are definitely, it's good that we are almost like across the globe. We're missing Asia, but we're almost across the globe.
And I'll give you even on top of that one. I mean, me coming from a parent that has a little one with special needs. So I have a little one that's autistic, right? And so sometimes we have our good days and sometimes we have really bad days. And so just even simply just offering that flexibility of like, I'm going to come in late, or just even those little small things that seem small to you or to the rest of the company goes such a long way, because it's helping them kind of be like, okay, might have been a very challenging morning, but I can get through the rest of the day because, you know, my situation is accepted, that safe place, right? That Petronila was talking about earlier, you know, just the safe place, right? I think that goes a long way when it comes down to those additional rewards and compensations that, you know, leaders need.
I so much agree. Recently, we organized an event for CHROs, as Chief Learning Officers. And normally I organized events in the evening, but this time we did it in the afternoon. And when I asked some of the people that I really know, like, why are you not coming? Yeah, my boss I don't know how to tell him that I'm actually leaving for this HR conference. And I have something like, you're the CHRO of a company of like, what is it, like 2,000 people, 5,000 people. You're not able to ask your boss, the CEO, or the chief CHRO, if you're the chief learning officer, to kind of like leave the place earlier. And this is then even for a business reason, let alone for private reasons. Like if you want to pick up your child from school, or there is something like that culture makes a big difference if you want to stay or not. Yeah.
So before I ask the final question, which will unfortunately be so fast because we are already coming to the end of our time, Hacking HR has asked me to mention that they are going on the road next week. And so their road show will be in sunny coastal San Diego next week on June 30th. You can join us for a margarita, great conversations, and a chance to connect with 85 plus HR leaders from across the region. It'll start at 5:30 p.m. on June 30th at the Margaritaville. Someone from Hacking HR is going to drop a link in the chat here. So if you're in San Diego or will be in San Diego, or know an HR pro who's in San Diego, we would love for you to fill it out and to join the party. And I'm sure you know, whether you drink alcohol or not, when HR people get together without the rest of the company, we're a lot of fun. Panelists, we are unfortunately coming to the end. I don't even think we have time for another question. So I just want to summarize a couple of things that I heard here. One is to really pay attention if you are in global markets, to pay attention to local, right? And Petronella, you said it, think globally, act locally. And so as David said, Cindy is talking about daycare, which in the US is a huge issue and is very important and often very worrisome. And in the Middle East, not so much, because the culture and the structure is different. And so really thinking about how you can serve the people in the places where you are serving, and what incentives and what compensation make sense for them. I heard some really, really interesting incentives, throughout. And I have to agree with Jess, as an executive coach myself, that executive coaching can be incredibly impactful. It often costs less than giving mass raises and can be extended throughout the company in group and individual settings. And we heard a lot about doing your research, connecting with other people. You are in the place to connect with other people. So look through the comment section, put your LinkedIn connection information in the chat, let people know what industry you're in, and really start building those connections to be able to network with people in your industry, in your country, in your region, or globally, who can help you really think critically about what is going to impact your organization. I want to thank you all so much for being here. You're an incredible group of panelists and a great audience, and we'll see you on the next one. The next panel is compensation benchmarking and market trends, coming up in 5.
Thank you.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to the last panel for today, compensation benchmarking and market trends. My colleague Jessa is going to bring our panelists for today on the screen. In the meantime, please leave in the chat, where are you joining from? Hey, Andreas. Hey, Raji. Rika.
Hello.
Okay. In the interest of time, let's do a quick round of introduction. That'll be about 30 seconds each panelist, and then we straight away move into the panel conversation. Let's start with Andreas, because he's the only man in the room right now with the women dominating the panel.
Right. Yes, it goes both ways. Thank you, Natasha. Wonderful to be here. Hi, Raji. Hi, Reka. So quick one for me. I'm dialing in from Athens, Greece, actually. So it's a late evening for me, and it's very hot here in Greece. I'm the Senior Director of People Operations, Rewards, and Analytics for an EdTech startup. Well, not a startup anymore. We're a scale-up now, 700 plus global people, called Preply. We match tutors and learners together for primarily language learning. Previously, I worked in corporate and tech and private equity, a mix of all. So I've done rewards at most stages of the organization. So really excited for our conversation today.
Lovely. Ladies, please take the lead.
Are you good? I'll go. I'm actually, Andreas, interestingly, I was supposed to be in Greece this week for a trip with some friends, but I decided not to go. But instead, I'm in Napa, California, which is quite nice as well, for actually Radford Strategic Steering Committee meeting. I'm attending that for the couple days. So I am currently in a role at Palo Alto Networks. It's a cybersecurity company. And I am an advisor to the product org, and I also work on the M&A compensation work stream. Been in the mostly tech space in the compensation function for about 15 years. Had a variety of roles, everything from consulting to owning the function, and everything in between. So yeah, happy to be here today. It's my favorite topic to talk about.
Lovely. Over to Raji.
Hi, Andreas, Reka, Natasha. Nice to meet you guys. So I'm dialing in from India, Chennai, and I look after HRBP for a company called Everstage. We offer a sales commissioning platform primarily based in US and India, and we are about a little over 200 plus folks, and we are a startup, but we are scaling fast. We are a Series B funded. So we recently did comp benchmarking, so very interested to talk about it and excited to collaborate with you all.
Great. So my opening question is, what are some of the myths about compensation benchmarking that you have come across with business leaders and organizations so far? Question is open to all panelists. Anybody may take the lead.
I can start, and you want to follow? I'll do a very quick one. I'll do a very quick start. I guess my myth here is that a lot of leaders think of compensation as the answer to everything, and it is not the answer to everything, right? So that's my simple answer. It is rarely the answer to everything. So most leaders, in my current organization, my previous organization, think if we benchmark properly and we pay a lot of money to people, then most of the other problems in HR will go away, whether that's cultural, whether that's retention, whether that, all of the other headaches that we have as an org. That's a myth, right? Of course, paying people enough is enough, or good enough, or well, is only one small part of the puzzle, which is the entire HR lifecycle. So that's my favorite myth. I'll let my co-panelists follow.
I can't agree more. because most times people think you get the benchmarking data and that's just going to solve all the problems and that's just going to be very direct answers, but that's not how it is. You do have to deep dive a little more with the data that you have. It's just going to be a guiding tool. So I can't agree more with what Andreas just shared.
What I'd like to jump in here and say is, like, for me, I don't know if it's a myth but one of the things that I struggle with is the word like paying at market. When you're doing benchmarking, like that word is just thrown around. And I don't know if everybody understands what it means to pay at market. And there's this sometimes misconception that if it's a midpoint of the range, it's market, and anything below that is below market, and anything above that is above market. But if you have a range that you're using for hiring and mobility and promotion and all of that, usually that's the entire range is within market, right? Like you're obviously taking and the other thing is, how do you define market, right? Like based on your peers or based on industry or region or whatever else. So that's a myth that I would love to bust, and I have spent most of my career trying to bust that. But yeah, so that's a one which people throw around a lot without fully like appreciating what goes into benchmarking.
Awesome. So let's step back for a moment. When the world was perfect before COVID, we had organizations working from office, and there was just a single work model. So your compensation was benchmarking, and your trends were mostly based on your geographical location, your role, criticality, your level in the organization. But now with things changing, and there are like multiple ways of work models that we have: hybrid, remote, completely work from office. What has been your observation in the change in benchmarking trends? Are there any changes in the benchmarking trends? That's the question.
I mean, I'd say, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Raji.
No, you go ahead, Rekha.
I would say yes and no. Yes, there are changes in how people are working and how they're, expecting to be paid and things like that. But the other change, even more than like the whole remote and hybrid and all of that, is the pay transparency. How we're, that's been a big force in our world, beyond even that, because now the way we communicate about pay, the kind of questions we're having about pay, all of that has shifted. So yes and no, there are some trends that we're keeping in mind, but all said and done, I mean, me personally, and this is my personal opinion, is that we still index to, regional based pay. And ultimately we're still doing a lot of the things the traditional way. And I think, at least in the US, where I'm based in the tech space in the Bay Area, we're returning back to more like in office and all of that. And, now where all the remote hiring has stopped in a lot of companies, and, we're expecting people to either relocate back to where the office is located, or within a certain mile radius of an office where you have it, or, sometimes they're not able to meet the requirements and they have to find something else. So it's more noise, but the actual reality is not. I don't think it's shifted that much, and people are like accepting it more and more, even though if you were to look at media and LinkedIn and stuff, you would think that it's all changing so much, but I don't know if on the ground it's that big of a change.
I'll jump in, Reggie, and then you can. I'm gonna have to agree here with Rick, also from the ground, right? I think we've gone through, when I joined my current company, we were kind of a Raji size 200. We've now grown, tripled for quadruple size, and we set in a compensation framework. And at that point, we were hiring a lot of remotely as well. Then we went through a shift to get the people back. I don't actually think the pillars, right, the classics have changed, right? You choose your strategy, right? Whether that you're gonna pay everybody the same wherever they're based or not, you choose your duty leveling system. I think those basics are pillars of a good rewards philosophy. I'll just add to Rekha's point a little bit. What I have seen change is the cognizance of leadership to actually treat rewards as more strategic, in terms of, do you know what? We now have to think about all these things, right? Whereas we were West Coast based, or we were London based, or whatever. We didn't have to worry. We chose. Now we have to think about these things. I've got an amazing candidate who wants to work most of his time from whatever, Guatemala, right? I'm just throwing names there, or Bali, right? Actually, I love this guy, right, or this lady, and I want to offer them, right? How do I do it, right? And then they come to us as the experts. And then, of course, it's not a one-off, right? You have to tell them, we're going to have to build, if we hire this person there, we're going to have to build a philosophy around that. So what I've seen more and more is these conversations are happening at a much more strategic level, where businesses are building these, right, whether small or big, building these fundamentals, logic fundamentals, based on business strategy and beyond, from scratch, right? Whereas previously it might have been very, very basic. We've got a couple of locations, we're just going to focus on those, right? I don't think businesses can afford to do that nowadays, given the level of talent, and especially with the new jobs and positions that are being built in. Talent is everywhere, right? So if you accept as a business that you're going to do hybrid, you're going to do some remote, right? Then you have to build a much more strategic framework from the very beginning.
Yeah, I just want to add one point here. I think sometimes it's also in which direction the company wants to go. It could be their call. Like they could take a stand and say that I don't care whether it's going to be hybrid or remote or in office. I'm just going to look at the market data, and I'm going to look at the performance, and I'm going to do the compensation from there on, or I'm going to look at a different evaluation for the roles in remote or hybrid or in office. So I think it's just depends on what the company believes is right for them to do, and it's a call that they should probably think before they get into this exercise and not after, which may give some clarity when they go about planning these, probably looking at how the reward structure should look like for the team.
Amazing insights. Rekha, you want to add something? Sorry, my screen is freezing, so I'm not sure if you were trying to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say that ultimately it's just to Raj's point, it's setting the strategy. Do you want to be a remote first company, or do you want to be a in-office culture company, and then using the rewards to incentivize that behavior that you want? So fundamentals are, the same. It's just what are you driving for?
Lovely. So I'm going to shift our focus towards some strategic conversations now. Looking at the role of leadership and business, especially the CFOs in compensation-related conversations. What has been one of or two of your biggest challenges when it comes to convincing or influencing your leaders and stakeholders on the credibility of the benchmarking that the HR leaders are doing?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in just to add my experience at least. So you do need to have your homework done when you're going in for a comp benchmarking exercise, which is actually very massive. It's just very simple when we say it, but it takes a lot of groundwork to do. And even after the exercise is completed, you have to sit down and analyze the whole lot of data that you have and how you're going to map it against your employees. So it starts with how you want to do this whole exercise. So the clarity within yourself is going to be very important. And secondly, you have to get the right set of competition that you want to map against your company with. If I'm a 200 member employee startup, I can't map myself with a multinational company or somebody with 5,000 employees or somebody who's a conglomerate. So the data is going to be very skewed. So I need to have those specifics right. And when I'm sharing these data with my finance head or the function managers or function heads, it should be the data that they're looking for. So if I'm going to share the comp data with them, would they believe that this is the right value that they've got for their own team members? Starting from the competition that we want to be evaluated against, till how we want to present the whole data, what is the philosophy that we want to follow. So as long as we have those clarity, I think it sort of helped me to at least position this across with my teams internally.
I would just say there. I mean, what I've been successful in doing in my career, working with functional leaders, especially being in the Bay Area and the tech space. There's such a constant competition for good tech talent, and so there's always there's this challenge against, is this truly the right market data? Is it real time enough? And all of those things, right? So my approach is always saying, like, market data is one point of data. It's not like whatever the market 2 or 3 sources that I'm using tell me, we're just going to go with that blindly. Like, market data is like thousands of companies are matching to those roles. Thousands of companies are using that data. So it's by design a little bit generic. It's not meant to apply in exact ways to every company. So it's informing your strategy and informing your pay ranges, but not completely setting them. So when you go with that approach, I think it lands better. The last thing that like a CTO or like head of engineering wants to hear is like a comm person coming and saying, oh, but this is what the market is telling, and completely ignore what they're saying. Like, you have to be a consultant to them, an advisor to them, and be like, this is one signal from the market, but let's apply it to what is relevant to our company, what ties in with our, what is the product strategy that we need to deliver on, and what roles do we need to get there. And maybe we need to go, away from what the market is telling us, but at least use that as a guiding factor. So I think coming back to saying, like, this is one source of data, I'll bring it to you, I'll have some recommendations, but it's not like the be all and end all. And like, just building that credibility and partnership with them generally works out well.
I agree. Both great points, particularly, the kind of transparency from Adri, and again, I think Rekha's point around don't trust the data blindly. Right? I think it's a great point. I'll add my own spin on things. Like, as always, everybody's got an opinion on compensation, right? On leadership, right? It's everyone's an expert, right? So I usually twist there's a well-known saying, less is more. With compensation, I actually twist it around. I think more is more, right? When it comes to compensation, i.e. show more, use more data, right? So we personally, and especially nowadays where everyone's got access to everything, don't want to name names, like let's say our CFO, he'll go on Glassdoor and he'll see this one person who is an engineer in somewhere, and he'll say, well, like, look at these guys, they're paying their engineers 20% more than us. That's why we can attract them. It's like, that's one data point. So more is more is in, we have a lot of benchmarking tools. We pay for them. We think they're worth their money, right? So, the Radfords that Rekha is very familiar with. We have Mercer. I'm not going to name names. We have Ravio, Pave, whatever, right? Name it. I think blending everything together really helps, right? And then also being able to show how, like, right to Rekha's point, right? Being able to show how, depending on what you set as your target companies, right? Where you set your leveling system, that each tool can throw out a wildly different number. So what we can do as a compensation partner to you as an expert is take all those numbers, apply some sort of common sense as well and strategic thinking, right? And bring the number back. If you disagree with it, let's have a conversation. And then my last point is the conversation itself. The conversation nowadays needs to be ongoing, right? It's no longer enough to have once a year or biannual, like the traditional tools, right? Load of data, and then you come back and review. The market just moves too fast nowadays, right? So AI talent, I don't have the traditional tools, don't even have anything on good AI talent. How am I supposed to know how much to pay a great AI engineer nowadays or a data scientist with AI skills? So again, I'm going to have to make some really educated guesses and talk about strategy. But the important thing is I'm going to go and talk to my C-level constantly, right? And say to them, look, I think we should pay our AI people whatever we're paying our normal engineers and apply 20% markup, right? That's what I think. Like, it might change 6 months down the line, right? It's fine to change it, right? Let's just have a conversation, agree. Because otherwise, especially in the market that me and Raji are in, is fast-moving scale-ups, losing on talent can be fatal, right? So it's a constant and conversation.
Brilliant. So coming back to the strategy focus again, with the boom of startups everywhere in the global market, what are some of the strategic changes or strategic inputs that are coming in for benchmarking between a startup, an early stage startup, a scaling startup, and an enterprise organization? By enterprise, I mean the large organizations.
Yeah, well, I can start because I've gone through a journey, right? So I've started. We started as a very small. When I came in, here we didn't have a leveling system. We didn't have anything, right? So I think what I would say, when you're very small, you just need to be scrappy, right? You need to be very, very scrappy, and don't be selective, right, in terms of what to focus on at that point. Or so what I mean is, it depends where you're growing at, right? If your startup is growing and you're I don't know, I'm just giving some examples. You're a B2B SAS provider and you need to focus on scaling the sales team, put all your efforts in figuring out how much you need to pay your good salespeople, right? If you're scaling your product and you need to ensure your product, then focus on engineering product. Don't focus on everybody, right? Focus, when you're small, choose your battles, right? And make sure you get the right talent at the right place, right? At that point, you probably can't afford, multiple service subscriptions or custom tools, right? So it's really about being scrappy, maybe choosing one and sticking with it, but really choosing the strategy, right? So prioritize the roles that really directly impact revenue or very hard to replace. As you start scaling, for me, then you start putting the basics in, right? Which I'm sure, Rek and Raji, you've seen, so I can let you talk a little bit more about that. But the basics really are non-negotiable, and they haven't changed for a few years, right? So you need a leveling framework, right? You need some sort of leveling framework in comp, because otherwise you're going to come, even if you're a scrappy startup, when you're 100, 200 people, you're going to start getting questions. Why is this engineer being poorer than me, etc.? So focus on the leveling on your progression system. Focus on career frameworks. How do you progress from one level to another? What skills do you need, right? So people understand, right, what progression they need, to get that bigger salary. And then, of course, get a little bit more tools. I've already talked about that. Get a couple of, maybe a traditional tool, maybe one of those new real-time black box tools, right? And start putting them together. And start putting a holistic strategy in everything that we've just discussed. Are you remote or hybrid? What is your location strategy in terms of payment? Do you apply, way of living, cost of living, right, on top, etc., etc. I would say for me, I started when we were about 200, and that's probably an ideal point. Below 200, you can probably get away with being scrappy. Anything above that, you start needing all these things. For larger organizations, I think I'll let some of my colleagues talk about them a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, for a large, it's honestly like the basics are, to Andrea's point, like it's the same. You definitely want a well-defined compensation philosophy. And in addition to a well-defined compensation philosophy, you need some guiding principles. So when I've been a head of compensation at large companies, enterprise public companies, like there's already been a defined more or less comp philosophy. So then when I came in, I'm like, first thing, yes, we have a philosophy, but do all the leaders understand? Like if I went to maybe a senior manager or like a first level manager and asked them, like, what is the compensation philosophy of the company? And if an employee came to you, would you be able to explain it to them? Maybe not like a sentence that you've memorized, but more like the essence of it. And a lot of times they don't, because it hasn't been communicated, it hasn't been translated and become part of the DNA of the company. So I think of it as the same as, every company has those values that they put on their website and they all talk about it. They have it on their walls and everything, at least in the large companies. I think of it as this, you should be able to just say it. Like if anybody can stop you in the cafeteria and say, what's our comp philosophy? You should be able to answer. So one is comp philosophy. The second is guiding principles, right? So if we have certain guiding principles, it just makes us more consistent in how we make every single decision. So for example, the guiding principles that I like to use in my job, no matter what level I'm operating at, is, equitability, scalability, and simplicity, right? So what that means is even the smallest decision of like, should I give this person a 10% over max exception, like that, those day-to-day requests that we get, all the way to like building an equity program, right? Like for the biggest possible programmatic thing, you apply the same principles to every comp decision you make. So those to me are like really important tools to have set up. And then of course, job architecture. I mean, like that is literally like the sort of foundation of everything. I mean, when people come and say there's retention issues, there's, talent attraction issues, they think it's comp, but so like I would say 9 times out of 10, it comes down to like, we don't have enough, definition of levels and understanding of, what mobility options employees have. So they leave because they don't even know what they can do next and, what their career path can look like. And that all comes down to a good job architecture. And for that, my only thing would be think bigger. So I've worked last year, I was doing independent consulting. I set up my own company called the Comp Ally, and I consulted with mostly startups and, smaller companies. But when I was helping them build job architecture, I was using what I've used at really, really large companies like Atlassian and others that I've worked at, because I'm like, your goal is to get there someday. So might as well build with that scalable solution in mind and not just very short-sighted and only thinking about the next few months or year. So so that would be my advice.
I'm just here taking notes for this question because I think these are all very important points for an organization of like ours. So I'm good to sit down.
Sure. Awesome. So my last strategic question, and then we move our focus to tech. With AI and a lot of other technology coming into the market, there are roles which are absolutely new, and they're called the hot roles in a lot of global markets. And we may or may not have a comp benchmark data for it. What is the strategy in that case for the HR leaders to do benchmarking for these kind of roles that are absolutely new with no historical data?
I mean, I think I already mentioned something, right? So I think I mentioned it in the answer to my previous call. I think it's just reasonable assumptions, right? What I would call them, right? In fact, I think I used that word to one of my leaders, right? You make reasonable assumptions based on your expertise and the data you have. So I have a very clear example, right? I have a specific role that I was asked to benchmark. My reasonable assumptions for that point is that it was 20% above the core role that I aligned more to it. The important thing is to deconstruct that role, right? So if you don't have a full understanding of the role, right, which is in the new roles you don't, try using some sort of a building block approach, right? So break down the role in its components, right? So if it's let's say AI data scientist, right? So somebody who uses AI tools. So it is still a data scientist, right? So let's say it's 60-70% data science, right? Maybe it's 20% PM, right? Product manager. And then the 10% is the additional AI they're an expert on because they've done a PhD in AI or something like that, right? So that 10%, what is that worth, right? For me, in this example, right, I'm giving, it was worth at 20% on top. Am I right? Who knows, right? I don't know, right? I don't know. They might, I won't tell you if they accepted the offer or not, right? It doesn't matter. So I think what's important that is you make assumptions that you can stand behind, right? By being very logical and deconstructing the role. The market will, I think the market will obviously catch up, and we'll see if we were right in 6 to 12 months, which is probably too late by that point, right? So Radford will probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, catch up in like 6 months, right? Something like that, to 8 months. But we do have other tools right now at place, and there are some other cool tools I want to advertise here, but they do give you more real-time info, right? So taking that and some of the assumptions you're an expert, I think that's the approach I use personally for these new roles.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I know there's so much noise about AI. It's like the buzzword. Everybody's kind of talking about how do we price AI talent and everything. But anybody who's been in comp long enough, we've done this before. It's not the first time that we have a new role. A few years ago, it was like data science. And then a few years before that, I remember it was like customer success, right? Like now it's like everybody understands what customer success is. So this was about 15 years ago. And I was actually working at Radford at the time as a consultant. And all my clients were calling me and be like, oh, how do we price this customer success role? It's kind of a combination of sales and support and this and that, like all of that. And, we had to get creative. Then it was data science. So or even regions, right? Like we need to price some jobs in a region that like there's no market data available. Like there probably hasn't even been much hiring for this role in the region. And it's just like an up and coming region for tech talent or any specific type of talent. So like we've had to get creative before. We've had to do hybrid pricing. We've had to like call up our friends in the comp network and figure out what everybody's doing and crowdsource solutions. So use the same tools that you've done in the past for this AI thing. And ultimately, I think there's, to Andrea's point, there are some tools that are a little bit more real time. But the traditional surveys are like Radford, Mercer and stuff are probably going to take some time to catch up, at least a year, I would say. But in the meantime, I mean, my guess is that it's going to become like AI is going to be like in every job, not just AI engineering or ML engineering. There might end up being like a skill premium for certain AI skills or something like that on top of like, whatever the market's telling us for a certain job. If someone also has those AI skills or the job requires them to have that, then it's a small like premium. But until we figure all that out, just use the solutions you always have. Just because it's AI, it's not any like different or scarier than like the first time you had to price, engineers in Poland like 10 years ago. And now we have so much data for like, for example, Poland, right? I remember at one point I had to price engineering talent in Pakistan and there was like no data available at all. And I went to Radford because that was my only source at the time. And they had one data point. It was a roll-up of every job in Pakistan, like one roll-up point. But using that, I has extrapolated and added some premium, this, that, and like we figured it out. So, if you're a comp professional, you've outside the box before, do it again. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I'm just going to double click on what Rekha just said because this AI is just like what we had like roles like 5 years back and 10 years back. And even today, not all companies have the benchmarking data directly linked for the market because a project manager for me could mean a project manager differently for another company. So there is no one-on-one direct match for some of the roles even today outside of AI. So we have to do an internal leveling as well to have our own judgment in some cases and use some of the other elements we've always used to get the benchmarking understanding with the market, or like we always have done, and probably work around something which makes sense for the role without compromising the complexity or the scope of it that it performs. So that's what I would probably approach this.
Awesome. All right. I'm moving our final focus on the role of technology in comp benchmarking. AI is being used everywhere right now. So in your experience, do you see AI playing a role in comp benchmarking and market trends? If yes, any case studies? If not, do you see anything happening in the future with AI intersecting with comp benchmarking and market trends?
Yeah, I mean, like I would say 2 applications at least. I mean, there's so many, but the 2 that I'm actively working on, well, one is like, just using AI to write some basic like job descriptions and that kind of thing, or getting a recommendation for a benchmark from, of course, we're not going to just take that and be like, okay, this is AI is telling us this, but like being able to say, I need a person who can do this, 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 this. And then based on public data, because now pay transparency, people have to post ranges and stuff like that, and get a sense of like what a job description would look like and what, kind of benchmark that could be, based on what's available in the market, or even within like survey sources of data, something as simple as like we download all this data and like we could just have some keywords, and then it matches it to the Bradford job description based on that and says, okay, this could be the 50th percentile or something like that. The other thing which I'm trying to build is more of an internal facing tool, which uses AI and looks at, for offer recommendations. So our talent acquisition partners come to us for offer recommendations oftentimes. And so right now I go and I look at what's the peer data, like internal parity, how is everybody else in that role placed in terms of base pay, but also like unvested equity and how much equity is vesting, like all of that from a total compensation perspective. I mean, hopefully we can build an AI tool that can do exactly that and say, okay, like here's, just summarize all that data and be like, this is a solid comp recommendation, maybe give like, a more conservative to a more, to an average to like something more aggressive and things like that. So that's something we're working on building. Well, we're not there yet, but that's an application that would save us a lot of time.
I haven't come across a full-fledged AI tool yet in comp benchmarking, but what I at least have seen or looked at is something where it helps in moving the static data into more dynamic. Like, so if you share a particular role with a skill and a metric of where they are in terms of experience, at least I've seen places where the data moves from static to a dynamic mode of it, places where if it's in percentile 50th or 75th or 90th percentile, that's where I'm looking at, but I still believe there is going to be a lot of human judgment coming in place to make the final call. That's what I have in mind.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with Rich point about human judgment. Of course, that will never disappear for now. On my end, very similar to Rekha, internal looking, we of course work very close with the TA team to have much more automated suggestions. Suggestions that used to sit in Excel spreadsheet where you choose the level of role. Now they're much more. We're working getting them much more sophisticated in terms of more real time. The other thing I'm working on, which I think has been mentioned, is more on the fairness analysis, right? So and anomaly detections. Current AI capabilities allow us to do all that much faster, whereas it take us a few days to look through all of the different cases and understand why are certain people being paid certain way, why are there discrepancies within our ranges. I think nowadays the tool that we've built can do that in very, very short amount of time, right? It can ingest incredible amounts of data and then just pinpoint statistical significant anomalies, right? Exceptions within our employees, and then also suggest remediation strategies, right? So they can suggest, this employee, right, needs a 20% raise because, and then you take that all in-house during a pay review cycle, and then you make some more human-led decisions, right? I just suggested. So that's been a very good case study for me. But the other thing I'm seeing in the market, of course, is that all of the vendors in the compensation market are slowly introducing really cool AI tools, right? Not something groundbreaking yet. I haven't seen anything groundbreaking yet, but really cool stuff, right? So traditional tools are slowly introducing AI agents that scan the market much more continuously instead of just relying on submissions by their clients. There are tools that have very good dashboards and visual representation. So it's there, it's getting there, right? I think we're in the early stages of compensation tools adding some very cool capabilities, so you don't have to build everything in-house.
And I feel like with AI, I mean, we're trying in the HR applications and comp applications, we're trying to like run before we can even crawl. I mean, even basic things like having salary submitted to vendors directly from HRIS integration rather than like submitting matching data, like all of that is already a huge improvement in process, and just saving all that time. Like we still like have Excel sheets where we submit and like go back and forth, and it's so much easier to just have it connected to an HRIS and get the data directly from. So those kinds of things are already so meaningful. And then of course, AI is great, but I think we're still like kind of behind on how much, we were trying to like run before we can crawl. So we'll get there, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Awesome. Bang on time. Before we wrap up, a quick nudge to the audience that have joined us. We have our Hacking HR Roadshow going live at San Diego next week on 30th June. Join us for Margarita, great conversations, and connect with 85,000 plus HR leaders. It is at Margarita Villa at 5:30 p.m. We'll drop the form in the chat, which my colleagues would have already done. If you're in San Diego or know someone who is there, we'd love you to sign up. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And a very lovely evening, morning, afternoon to the panelists. Great conversation, great insights, and a lovely evening to the audience. Thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.